After dropping my son and his wife at the airport for their dream vacation to Paris, I received a text message that made my blood run cold. It was from Rosa, my housekeeper of 10 years. She wrote 3 simple sentences. "Mr. King, do not come home. Pull over. Check the living room cameras immediately." I steered my Cadillac onto the shoulder of the highway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the security app on my phone, and what I saw on that small screen froze the marrow in my bones. My house was not empty, and the people inside were not burglars in masks. They were the very same people I had just hugged goodbye at the departure gate. My name is Desmond King, and I am 73 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer, building bridges that could withstand hurricanes and skyscrapers that scraped the clouds. I know how to spot a hairline fracture in concrete before the whole building comes down. But I failed to see the cracks in my own foundation until it was almost too late. I thought I had built a legacy for my son Jamal. I thought I had welcomed a daughter into this family when he married Tiffany. I was wrong. I had invited termites into a wooden house. Before I tell you how I declared war on my own flesh and blood, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Your support helps me share these stories of truth and justice. The morning started with deception wrapped in a smile. I remember the humidity of the Atlanta air as I loaded their Louis Vuitton suitcases into the trunk of my car. 4 suitcases for a 2-week trip. I did not think much of it at the time. Tiffany was wearing a white sundress and a wide-brimmed hat, looking every bit the excited tourist. Jamal, my 32-year-old son, was pacing nervously, checking his watch. I attributed it to travel anxiety. Traffic to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was brutal as usual. I looked in the rearview mirror at them. They were holding hands. Tiffany leaned her head on Jamal's shoulder. "You are too good to us, Dad," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with syrup. "This trip is exactly what Jamal and I needed to reconnect. You know, work has been so stressful for him." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. I knew Jamal had not worked a real day in 6 months since he quit the construction management job I got him. He said the boss was too demanding. I knew he was soft. I had tried to raise him with the discipline of the steel mills I grew up in, but maybe I had given him too much too soon. "You two enjoy Paris," I said. "Go see the Eiffel Tower, walk along the Seine. Your mother and I always wanted to go back there one more time before she passed." At the mention of Ruby, my late wife, the car went silent. Ruby had been gone for 5 years, but her presence still filled every room of my house and every chamber of my heart. She was the one who taught me that money is just paper, but character is gold. We pulled up to the Delta terminal. I got out and helped the porter with the bags. Jamal hugged me. His embrace felt loose, distracted. "Thanks, Pop," he mumbled. "We will call you when we land. Do not wait up." Tiffany kissed my cheek. Her perfume was expensive and overpowering. "Take care of yourself, Dad. Do not forget your blood pressure medication. We love you." I watched them walk through the sliding glass doors. They waved once and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, feeling that familiar ache of loneliness that comes with old age. The house would be quiet for 2 weeks, just me and the memories. I got back into my car and merged onto the highway, heading south. I was looking forward to a quiet evening, maybe listening to some jazz and working on my model ships. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I usually ignore texts while driving, but the notification sound was specific. It was the emergency alert I set for Rosa. Rosa is not just a housekeeper. She is a 60-year-old tank of a woman who has protected my home and my secrets for a decade. She never texts during the day unless the house is on fire. I glanced at the screen. The message was short. "Mr. King, do not come home. Pull over. Check the cameras." My engineer brain kicked in. Logic over emotion. Was there a fire? A break-in? I pulled the Cadillac onto the emergency shoulder near exit 248. Cars whizzed past me, shaking the frame of my vehicle. My hands were trembling slightly as I unlocked my phone. I tapped the security app icon. The feed loaded. It showed the front of my house. A taxi was parked in the driveway. The trunk was open. I switched to the living room camera. The image was crystal clear in 4K resolution. I saw the front door swing open. Jamal walked in first, dragging those same Louis Vuitton suitcases I had just unloaded at the airport. He was not in Paris, he was in my foyer. Then Tiffany walked in, and the transformation was terrifying. Gone was the sweet daughter-in-law who told me to take my medicine. She kicked the door shut with her heel. She threw her wide-brimmed hat onto the floor and let out a scream of frustration. "Is he gone?" she yelled. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Jamal checked his phone. "Yeah, I tracked his car. GPS. He is on the highway. We have time." I sat in my car on the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned gray. They had not gone to the airport. They had walked in one door and out the other, grabbed a taxi and circled back the moment I was out of sight. Why? I turned the volume up on my phone. Tiffany walked over to my liquor cabinet. That cabinet was locked, or at least I thought it was. She pulled a hairpin from her hair and jiggled the lock. It opened in seconds. She grabbed a bottle of my 1995 vintage Cabernet, a bottle I was saving for my 75th birthday. She did not bother with a glass. She took a swig straight from the bottle, red wine spilling down her chin. "God, I thought that old fossil would never leave," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Did you see him tearing up about Paris? Pathetic." Jamal was pacing the room. "Tiff, are you sure about this? If he comes back early, we are dead." "He is not coming back, you coward," Tiffany snapped. She marched over to the fireplace mantel. Above the fireplace sat the most precious thing I own, a framed photograph of Ruby and me on our wedding day, alongside a small porcelain urn containing her ashes. It was my shrine, my sanctuary. Tiffany looked at the photo. She sneered. "I am so sick of this woman watching me," she hissed. "Saint Ruby, the perfect wife, the perfect mother. Well, guess what, Ruby? Your son is a loser, and your husband is a fool." She swiped her hand across the mantel. "No," I screamed inside my empty car. On the screen, the photo frame and the urn flew off the shelf. They hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crash. The glass shattered. The porcelain broke. Gray ash spilled out onto the Persian rug. My breath caught in my throat. I felt a pain in my chest, sharp and hot, but it was not a heart attack. It was heartbreak. Pure, unadulterated heartbreak. Jamal flinched, but he did not pick it up. He did not defend his mother. He just looked at the mess and looked away. "Leave it," Tiffany said, stepping over the ashes of the woman who had knit her a scarf last Christmas. "We have 48 hours, Jamal. We need to find where the old man keeps the real money. The structural blueprints for the downtown project, the bearer bonds, the gold watches." She turned to Jamal, her eyes manic and predatory. "We strip this house clean. We sell everything to that fence, Kyle. And by the time your dad gets back from waiting for our call in Paris, we will be in Mexico with $5 million. Jamal rubbed his face. "But the safe, Tiff. It is biometric. We need his fingerprint." Tiffany laughed, a cruel, cold sound that echoed through my car speakers. "Do not worry, baby. I have a plan for that too. If we cannot open the safe, we will just have to make sure Daddy Dearest has a little accident when he gets home. An accident that leaves him incapacitated enough for us to get power of attorney." The video feed froze for a second as the signal buffered, then resumed. I sat there staring at the screen. The cars rushing past me on the highway sounded like ocean waves. My son. My own son was standing there watching his wife desecrate his mother's remains and planning to rob me blind. A tear rolled down my cheek. Just one. I wiped it away with my callous thumb. I looked at my hands. These hands had bent steel. These hands had poured concrete. These hands had held Jamal when he was a premature baby fighting for breath in the incubator. I had spent my life protecting him, building a world where he would never have to struggle like I did. And this was my reward. I reached for the gear shift. My instinct was to turn the car around, roar back to the house and tear them apart with my bare hands. I wanted to storm in there and show them what an angry old man from the steel mills could do. But then I looked at the shattered urn on the floor again. Number. Violence is the tool of the ignorant. I'm an engineer. I solve problems with precision. I calculate the load, I find the weak point, and I bring the structure down exactly how I want it to fall. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the old leather seats. They want a senile old man. They want a victim. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. Saul Cohen, my old army buddy, and the most vicious estate lawyer in the state of Georgia. Desmond Saul answered, his voice raspy from cigars. "Everything all right?" "No, Saul," I said, my voice steady and cold as a winter frost. "Nothing is all right, but it is about to get very interesting. I need you to activate the Vulture protocol." There was a pause on the other end. "Desmond, are you sure?" "That is the nuclear option. Once we start that, there is no going back." I looked at the screen one last time. Tiffany was kicking the shards of the urn under the sofa. Jamal was opening the drawers of my antique desk, dumping my papers on the floor. "I am sure," I said. "I am not going home, Saul. I am going hunting." I hung up the phone and put the car in drive. I did not take the exit from my house. I drove straight past it. If they wanted a war, I would give them a war. But they would not see me coming until the roof was already collapsing on their heads. To be continued. My hand was shaking as I reached for the gear shift. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn that car around. I wanted to roar back down the highway, crash through my own front gate, and drag my ungrateful son and his snake of a wife out by their collars. I wanted to confront them. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. I wanted to see the fear in their eyes when they realized the old man was not as senile or as helpless as they thought. I shifted into drive, my foot hovering over the gas pedal, ready to unleash 73 years of rage. But then the phone buzzed again. It was Rosa. Her second message was even more urgent than the first. It was typed in all caps. "Stop! Do not come back. There is a third." A third. My foot froze. I looked down at the phone screen, which was still resting on the passenger seat. I switched the camera view from the living room to the driveway camera. A sleek silver Mercedes had just pulled up behind the taxi Jamal and Tiffany had arrived in. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and he checked his reflection in the side mirror before walking toward my front door. I knew that face. It was Kyle. Kyle was a real estate broker who operated on the fringes of the law. He was the kind of man who smiled with too many teeth and smelled like cheap cologne and desperation. I had met him once at a charity gala where he tried to convince me to sell a plot of land I owned near the river for a fraction of its value. I had told him to get off my property then. Now, he was walking into my home as if he had a key. And he did. Tiffany opened the door for him before he even knocked. I switched the audio feed back on and held the phone close to my ear, straining to hear over the rush of traffic on the highway. "You said the coast was clear," Kyle said, walking straight past Tiffany into my foyer. His voice was impatient. "I do not like doing business in daylight, Tiffany. Neighbors talk." Tiffany closed the door and locked it. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Relax, Kyle. The old fossil is 40 miles away by now. He thinks we are on a flight to Paris. We have the house to ourselves for 2 weeks. But we need to move fast." I watched as the three of them, my son, his wife, and this vulture, gathered in my living room. Jamal was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, shaking his leg nervously. "Do you have the list?" Kyle asked. Tiffany pulled a folded piece of paper from her bra. I zoomed in on the screen, but I could not read the writing. I did not need to. Tiffany read it aloud. "First, the watch collection," she said. "He has a Patek Philippe from 1958, a gold Rolex day date, and 3 vintage pocket watches from the railroad era. You said you had a buyer in Miami for those." Kyle nodded, his eyes gleaming with greed. "I do. If they are in mint condition, I can get you $80,000 cash by tomorrow morning." "What else?" "The land deeds," Tiffany continued. "The 3 acres in Buckhead and the commercial lot downtown. The ones he keeps in the safe." Jamal suddenly looked up. His face was pale, sweating profusely even though the air conditioning was on. "We cannot sell the land, Tiff," Jamal stammered. His voice cracked like a teenager's. "Pop said that land is for the grandchildren. He said he was going to build a community center there. If we sell that, he will know. He will find out." Tiffany turned on him, her face twisting into a mask of pure venom. She walked over and grabbed Jamal by the chin, forcing him to look at her. "He is not going to find out until it is too late, you idiot," she hissed. "And do you want to talk about grandchildren? Do you want to talk about the future? There is no future, Jamal. Not unless we pay off your debt." Debt. The word hung in the air like a cloud of toxic gas. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. What debt? Kyle laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Listen to your wife, Jamal. The guys you owe in Vegas are not the kind of people who wait for a community center to be built. They want their money, and $500,000 is a lot of money to keep waiting. $500,000. The number hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. My son, the boy I had sent to private schools, the boy I had taught to balance a checkbook when he was 10 years old, had gambled away $500,000. I looked at Jamal on the screen. He looked small, defeated. He was 32 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a frightened child who had broken a window and was trying to hide the pieces. It was not all me, Jamal whined, his voice trembling. You spent half of that on the trips, Tiffany, the designer bags, the car. You told me to double down. You said I was due for a win. Shut up, Tiffany screamed. She raised her hand as if to strike him, and Jamal flinched. My son flinched. We are not discussing whose fault it is, she said, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper. We are discussing how we stay alive. We strip this house. We sell the watches. We sell the land. And we take the cash and go to Europe for real. By the time the old man realizes his safe is empty, we will be ghosting him from a beach in Nice. Kyle clapped his hands together. All right, lovebirds. Enough drama. Open the safe. I need to verify the deeds before I call my contact. Tiffany looked at the safe in the corner of the room, the safe that was hidden behind a painting of the Brooklyn Bridge, a bridge I had helped repair in the 80s. We are working on it, Tiffany said. We need his fingerprint, but do not worry. If we cannot crack the code, we have a plan B. Plan B? Kyle asked, raising an eyebrow. Let's just say, Tiffany smiled, and it was the coldest thing I had ever seen, that accidents happen to old men living alone in big houses all the time. A fall down the stairs, an overdose of heart medication. Once I have power of attorney, I can sign those deeds myself. I lowered the phone. My hand was numb. This was not a burglary. This was not just a son borrowing money without asking. This was a conspiracy. This was an assassination attempt on my life, my legacy, and my dignity. They were discussing my murder as casually as they were discussing the weather. I looked out the windshield. The highway stretched out before me, endless and indifferent. I could drive away. I could go to the police right now. I could show them this video. But the police would take hours. They would need warrants. They would knock on the door, and Tiffany would smile and say it was a misunderstanding. They would hide the evidence. Kyle would slip away. Jamal would lie. No. The police were a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I needed to cut the cancer out entirely. I was a structural engineer. When a building is compromised, you do not just patch the cracks. You reinforce the foundation, you isolate the load, and you bring the weight down on the exact point where the stress is highest. I needed to trap them, all of them. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. Panic was useless. Anger was fuel, but it had to be controlled. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Cohen. Saul Cohen was not just a lawyer. He was a pit bull in a three-piece suit. We had served together in Vietnam. I had saved his life in the jungle, and he had spent the last 40 years saving my money from the IRS and bad investments. He was the only man on earth I trusted with my life. I pressed call. It rang twice. Desmond, Saul's voice boomed. I thought you were on your way home to relax. Did you forget your keys? I did not waste time with pleasantries. Saul, listen to me very carefully. I am not at home. I am on the side of the highway. Jamal and Tiffany are inside my house. Kyle Vance is with them. Kyle Vance, Saul repeated, his tone instantly shifting from friendly to sharp. That's Slimeball. What is he doing there? They are robbing me, Saul. They are planning to empty the safe. Jamal is in deep with gambling debts, 500 grand. And Saul, they are talking about staging an accident for me if they cannot get the money. There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, dangerous silence. I am recording everything on the cloud server, I continued, but I need you to do something for me. I need you to activate the protocol. Saul hesitated. You mean the estate protocol? No, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming hard as granite. I mean protocol bridge claw. I heard Saul suck in a breath. Desmond, we wrote that up 10 years ago as a joke. A doomsday scenario. It freezes everything. It locks the trust. It alerts the federal monitors. It is a nuclear bomb for your assets. Do it, I commanded. Desmond, if I do this, there is no going back. Once the claw clamps down, nobody gets out. Not even Jamal. You are going to send your own son to prison. I looked at the screen one last time. I saw Jamal standing there, letting another man appraise my father's watch. The watch my father wore every day working on the railroad to put food on our table. Jamal was not just selling a watch. He was selling my history. I do not have a son anymore, Saul, I said, and a single tear traced a hot path down my cold cheek. I have a trespasser. Activate the bridge claw and call your contact at the FBI. I want to catch the whole nest. Consider it done, Saul said softly. Stay safe, Des. Do not engage them yet. I hung up. I sat there for a moment in the silence of the car. The decision was made. The bridge was rigged to blow. Now, I just had to wait for them to walk onto it. I put the car back in gear. I was not going home to fight. I was going to find a place to hide, to watch, and to wait. The hunter does not run into the clearing making noise. The hunter waits in the blind until the prey is comfortable, until the prey is eating, until the prey thinks it is safe. Then, he takes the shot. I merged back into traffic, leaving my home behind, knowing that when I returned, I would not be the victim they expected. I would be their worst nightmare. The game had just begun. I drove until the manicured lawns of my neighborhood were just a memory in the rearview mirror. I did not stop at a hotel with valet parking or room service. I headed for the part of town where the streetlights flicker and the pavement is cracked. I found a place called the Rusty Anchor Motel. The neon sign was missing the letter M, so it just read Hotel, buzzing like an angry hornet in the twilight. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear or to conduct business that could not survive the light of day. I pulled my Cadillac around the back, parking it between a dumpster and a rusted pickup truck to hide it from the road. I opened the trunk and dug out my emergency kit. Years of working on construction sites had taught me to always be prepared. I had a pair of oil-stained coveralls I used for roadside repairs and a faded baseball cap. I took off my Italian silk blazer, folded it carefully, and placed it in the tire well. I slipped into the coveralls, smeared a little grease on my cheek, and pulled the cap low over my eyes. When I looked in the side mirror, Desmond King, the wealthy engineer, was gone. Staring back was just another old man down on his luck, invisible to the world. I paid for the room with cash. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass did not even look up from his magazine. He slid a key across the counter, a plastic tag attached to it that was sticky with grime. Room 104. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and lemon disinfectant, a combination that made my stomach turn. The carpet was a shade of brown that I suspected was not the original color. I locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and wedged a chair under the handle. Only then did I sit on the edge of the sagging mattress and open my laptop. I might be 73 years old, but I helped design the smart grid for half the high-rises in Atlanta. I knew that a house is not just bricks and mortar. It is a machine, and like any machine, it can be controlled by the one who holds the manual. I connected to the motel's spotty Wi-Fi, engaged my VPN, and logged into my home server. My screen flickered to life. I had eyes everywhere. I switched the feed to my home office. This was my sanctuary. It was where I had drawn the blueprints for the suspension bridge that spans the river. It was where I had sat with Ruby planning our retirement. The walls were lined with mahogany bookshelves, filled with first editions and engineering manuals. Now, it was a crime scene. Tiffany was tearing through the room like a hurricane. I watched on the screen as she pulled books off the shelves, shaking them to see if money would fall out. She opened my filing cabinets, dumping 30 years of tax returns and project files onto the floor. She was screaming, but the audio was slightly muffled, so I adjusted the gain on the microphone hidden in the smoke detector. "Where is it?" she shrieked. Her voice was distorted by rage. "He has to have liquid assets. You said he kept cash here." Jamal was standing by the window, peering through the blinds. He looked terrified. "Tiff, keep it down. The neighbors might hear." "Screw the neighbors," Tiffany yelled, throwing a heavy brass paperweight across the room. It smashed into my framed diploma, shattering the glass. I watched my degree from Georgia Tech slide down the wall and land in a pile of debris. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. That diploma represented nights I studied while working 2 jobs. It represented the promise I made to my mother that I would be more than a laborer. Tiffany treated it like trash. "Look harder, Jamal," she ordered, pointing a manicured finger at the desk. "Check the floorboards. Check behind the paintings. Old people always hide things in the walls." Jamal moved to the large oil painting of the Brooklyn Bridge that hung behind my desk. He fumbled with the frame, his hands shaking. He pulled it away from the wall, and there it was. The safe. It was a Titan 5000, custom-installed, reinforced steel biometric scanner and a digital keypad. It was not something you bought at a hardware store. I had designed the installation myself, anchoring it into the concrete load-bearing wall of the house. "Jackpot," Tiffany whispered. Her eyes lit up with a greed so intense it looked almost demonic on the black and white screen. She rushed over, pushing Jamal aside. She started punching numbers into the keypad. "Try his birthday," Jamal said. She typed it in. The light blinked red. "Try Ruby birthday." Red light. "Try your birthday, Tiff." She paused, looking at him with disgust. "Why would he use my birthday? He hates me." "Try it anyway," Jamal pleaded. She typed it in. The safe let out a low beep, and the red light flashed faster. "System lockout in 3 attempts," a computerized voice announced from the safe speaker. "Damn it," Tiffany screamed, kicking the heavy steel door. She grabbed her hair, pacing the small room like a trapped animal. "We are locked out. We need the code or we need his fingerprint." I sat in the motel room, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my grease-smeared face. I took a sip of the lukewarm water from the bathroom tap. "You will never get that code," I thought. "That code is the date I met Ruby, combined with the coordinates of the first bridge I ever built. It is a map of my life, and you are not welcome in that territory." Then Jamal said something that made me sit up straight on the edge of the bed. "Maybe we can break it open," he said. "I saw a sledgehammer in the garage. If we hit the hinges hard enough, maybe it will pop." I watched Tiffany stop pacing. She turned to Jamal slowly. For a second I thought she was considering it, but then she raised her hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sound was sharp and loud, echoing through my laptop speakers. "You idiot," she hissed. "Do you know who your father is? He is a structural engineer. He builds things to withstand earthquakes. You think a sledgehammer is going to open a Titan safe?" She grabbed his face, squeezing his cheeks with her nails. "And besides," she continued, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper, "that safe has seismic sensors. It is wired directly to the police station. One heavy impact, one blow with a hammer, and the silent alarm trips. The cops would be here in 3 minutes. Do you want to go to jail, Jamal?" Jamal shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "No, Tiff. I just want the money." "Then use your brain," Tiffany spat, releasing him. "We cannot force it open. We need the key, and the key is attached to your father's hand." She walked back to the desk, sweeping the rest of my papers onto the floor to clear a space. She sat down and drummed her fingers on the mahogany surface. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was calculating, plotting. "We have to bring him back," she said finally. Jamal looked confused. "But we just sent him away. If he comes back, he will see all this. He will see the mess. He will know." "Not if we do it right," Tiffany said. Her eyes narrowed. "We call him. We tell him something happened. Something that would make a loving father turn his car around immediately." "Like what?" Jamal asked. "Like you are sick," Tiffany said. A smile spread across her face, a smile that chilled me to the bone. "You call him. You tell him we missed the flight because you collapsed at the airport. You tell him you are at the house and you are scared. He will come running. He always comes running for you." "And then what?" Jamal asked, his voice trembling. "When he gets here, what do we do?" Tiffany reached into her purse. She pulled out a small, orange prescription bottle. I zoomed in on the label. Xanax, high dosage. "Then we take care of him," she said. "We make him some tea. We put a few of these in it, enough to knock out a horse. When he is out cold, we drag him to the safe. We use his thumb to open it. We take everything." "And when he wakes up," Jamal asked. Tiffany shrugged. "If he wakes up, we tell him he had a stroke. We tell him he fell and hit his head. We tell him he is confused." "Who are they going to believe, Jamal? A senile, 73-year-old man with a history of heart problems? or his concerned son and daughter-in-law who are taking care of him. We will have the money. We will have the power of attorney. We can put him in a home and throw away the key. I stared at the screen. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. They were not just thieves, they were monsters. They were willing to drug me, gaslight me, and imprison me in my own mind just to fund their lifestyle. I looked at my hand, the hand Tiffany wanted to use as a key. I clenched it into a fist. It was a strong fist, a fist that had held hammers and wrenches and rivets. "You want me to come back?" I whispered to the empty motel room. "You want to lure me into your trap?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a burner phone I had bought at a gas station on the way here. "Fine," I said. "I will come back. But I am not coming back as the father you think you can manipulate. I am coming back as the architect of your destruction." On the screen, I saw Jamal pick up his phone. He looked at Tiffany for reassurance. She nodded, mouthing the words, "Make it sound real." My burner phone sat silent, but my main phone, the one I had left in the car, began to ring. I could see the notification pop up on my laptop screen. "Incoming call, Jamal." I let it ring. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Let them sweat, I thought. Let them wonder. I watched Jamal lower the phone, looking panicked. He did not answer, he told Tiffany. "Call him again," she ordered. "Keep calling until he picks up." I closed the laptop lid. The screen went black, plunging the motel room back into darkness. I stood up and walked to the dirty mirror hanging over the dresser. I looked at my reflection, the grease on my face, the old coveralls, the tired eyes. They wanted a show. I would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I picked up the burner phone and dialed my own voicemail, listening to the message Jamal had just left. His voice was fake, panicked, breathless. "Dad, please pick up. We are at the house. Something is wrong with my heart. I cannot breathe. Please come home." I saved the message. It was not a plea for help. It was evidence. I walked to the door and removed the chair. I unlocked the deadbolt. "I am coming, son," I said to the darkness. "But you better have that tea ready, because it is going to be the last drink you ever serve in my house." I stepped out into the humid night air. The neon sign buzzed overhead. "Hotel. Hotel." It sounded like a warning, or maybe it was a countdown. I got back into my car, but I did not head straight for the house. I had one stop to make first. If they wanted to play doctor, I needed to visit a pharmacy of my own. Not for Xanax, but for something that would keep me wide awake while they thought I was sleeping. I drove out of the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my tires like broken bones. The game had escalated. They had introduced chemical warfare. So be it. I merged onto the highway, the city lights blurring into streaks of red and gold. I was not Desmond the father anymore. I was Desmond the engineer, and I was about to bring the whole structure down on their heads. The neon sign outside my motel window buzzed with a rhythmic electrical hum that sounded like a dying insect. Inside room 104, I sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the tools of my trade. A laptop, a burner phone, and a thermos of black coffee so strong it could strip paint off a wall. I had also stopped at a gas station to buy a bottle of caffeine pills. My heart was already racing from the adrenaline of betrayal, but I needed my mind to be razor sharp. Tonight, there would be no sleep for Desmond King. My regular phone, the one Jamal thought was my only lifeline, sat on the nightstand. I stared at it, waiting. I knew he would call. Tiffany would make him. They needed to confirm the location of their target before they launched their attack. They needed to know if the old man was safely tucked away in his castle, ready to be besieged. At 8:15 exactly, the screen lit up. The photo I had set for the contact appeared. It was a picture of Jamal at his college graduation, smiling and holding up his diploma. I remembered that day. I remembered how proud I was. I remembered thinking that the King legacy was safe in his hands. Now looking at that smile felt like looking at a stranger. I let it ring 3 times. An old man does not answer on the first ring. An old man fumbles for his glasses. An old man moves slowly. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to drop into a gravelly whisper. I hunched my shoulders, channeling every ounce of fatigue I had felt in my 73 years. I slid the answer button. "Hello," I rasped. "Jamal, is that you?" "Hey, Pop." The voice on the other end was bright, too bright. It had the forced cheerfulness of a telemarketer selling a scam. "It is me," I am so sorry to call you this late. Did I wake you? I leaned back against the headboard, closing my eyes to focus on the audio. No, son, not yet. I paused, letting a heavy sigh escape my lips. I was just getting ready for bed. The house is so quiet without you two. I heard him exhale. It sounded like relief. Yeah, about that, Pop. We are having a nightmare with the flight. We are stuck on the tarmac, mechanical issues or something. The captain says we might be delayed another 3 hours. We have not even taken off yet. Lies. I looked at my laptop screen. The live feed from my living room showed Jamal standing near my fireplace, holding a glass of my whiskey. He was pacing back and forth. Tiffany was sitting in my leather armchair, filing her nails. Oh, that is terrible, I said, keeping my voice shaky. I thought you would be halfway over the Atlantic by now. I know, right? Jamal said. Listen, Pop, I was worried about you. You seemed really upset when you dropped us off. Your blood pressure was high last week. Did you eat dinner yet? The concern in his voice almost sounded real. That was the hardest part. If I did not have the camera in front of me, I might have believed him. I might have believed that my son loved me. But the camera does not lie. I am not hungry, I said. My stomach is a little upset. I think I just need to sleep. You have to eat, Pop, Jamal insisted. Look, since we are delayed anyway, let me order you some food. I can get that Italian place you like to deliver. Some lasagna. It will be there in 30 minutes. I gripped the phone tighter. It was a test. If I agreed to the delivery, the driver would ring the doorbell. If I did not answer, they would know I was not home. Or worse, Tiffany might have sent someone she knew, someone who would force their way in to check on me. No, son, I said firmly, but weakly. No food. I just took my sleeping pills, the strong ones Dr. Evans gave me. They knock me out pretty fast. I just want to drift off. Sleeping pills, the magic words. I watched on the screen as Jamal covered the microphone and whispered something to Tiffany. She stopped filing her nails and looked up, her eyes gleaming. She nodded vigorously, mouthing the words, "Ask him about the alarm." "Pop, are you sure?" Jamal said, coming back on the line. "Those pills are strong. Did you remember to set the alarm? I do not want you sleeping that deep if the alarm is not on." I smiled a bitter, joyless smile in the dim motel room. They wanted to know if they could move freely, if they could use a sledgehammer without triggering the sirens. I think so, I stammered, playing the part of the confused senior. I locked all the deadbolts. The chain is on. But the electronic alarm, I cannot remember the code. My memory, son, it is getting worse. Do not worry about it, Jamal said quickly. If the deadbolts are thrown, that is good enough. Just go to sleep, Pop. We will call you when we land in Paris. It will probably be morning for you. Okay, son, I whispered. Have a safe flight. I love you. I stopped. I could not say it. I could not say I love you to the man who is currently drinking my whiskey and plotting my demise. I love the idea of you being safe, I finished awkwardly. Me too, Pop. Sleep tight. I was about to hang up when I heard it. In the background of the call coming through the speaker of Jamal's phone, there was a sound, a deep, resonant chime. Bong, bong, bong. It was my grandfather clock, the antique Howard Miller floor clock that stood in the hallway. It was striking the quarter hour. It had a very specific, distinct tone, a deep brass vibration that you could feel in your chest. Jamal was supposed to be on a tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. An airport is a cacophony of jet engines, announcements, and crowds. It does not sound like a silent hallway with an antique clock chiming. I froze. I held my breath. Jamal must have realized it too. I heard a sharp intake of breath on his end. He coughed loudly, trying to cover the sound of the third chime. Cough, cough. Sorry, Pop. Throat is dry. Air conditioning on the plane is terrible. I said nothing for a second. I let the silence hang there heavy and dangerous. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to wonder if I had heard it. Pop, are you there? I am here, I said softly. Go to Paris, son. Do not miss your flight. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the bed as if it were a venomous snake. I immediately turned my attention back to the laptop. The performance was over. Now I needed to see the reviews. On the screen, Jamal was staring at his phone, looking pale. Did he buy it? Tiffany asked, standing up and walking over to him. I think so, Jamal said, wiping sweat from his forehead. But the damn clock chimed. Right in the middle of the call. I tried to cough over it. Tiffany rolled her eyes. He is senile, Jamal. He just told you he took the heavy sleeping pills. He probably does not even know what day it is, let alone recognize the sound of a clock over the phone. What did he say about the doors? He said the deadbolts are locked, Jamal reported, but he forgot to set the electronic alarm. He is wide open, Tiff. Tiffany clapped her hands together. Perfect. He took the pills. That means in 20 minutes, he will be dead to the world. We do not even need to be quiet. She walked over to the large window looking out at the driveway. Kyle will be back with the equipment in an hour, she said. We are going to drill that safe, Jamal. We are going to drill it right through the lock. And if the old man wakes up, well, he is drugged and confused. He might just trip and fall down the stairs. Tragedy strikes. Jamal looked at the stairs leading up to my bedroom. The bedroom where they thought I was currently lying in a drug-induced stupor. Are you sure he is asleep? Jamal asked. Tiffany laughed. She poured herself another glass of my wine. He is 73 years old, and he just swallowed a handful of narcotics. He is not waking up until next Tuesday. By then, we will be gone. I sat in the motel room watching them toast to my unconsciousness. I unscrewed the cap of the caffeine pills and popped 2 into my mouth, washing them down with the black coffee. My hands were steady now. The anger had crystallized into a cold, hard purpose. They thought the fortress was unguarded. They thought the dragon was asleep. They did not know that the dragon was wide awake, watching from the shadows, and he had just locked them inside the dungeon. I opened a new window on my laptop. I pulled up the control interface for the smart home system. I had installed the system myself. It controlled everything: the lights, the thermostat, the electronic locks, the sound system. You want to play games in my house? I whispered to the screen. You want to make noise? I hovered my mouse over the environmental controls. Let's see how you handle a little atmosphere. I was not just going to catch them. I was going to break them. I was going to make them wish they had actually gone to Paris. But first I had to wait. I had to let them get comfortable. I had to let them start drilling. I needed them to commit the crime fully. I checked the time, 8:25. Kyle would be there in an hour. I leaned back against the headboard and watched. It was like watching a reality TV show, where the contestants did not know the game was rigged. Jamal sat down on the sofa and put his feet up on my coffee table. He looked relaxed for the first time. He thought he had pulled it off. He thought he had fooled the old man. You have no idea, son, I thought. You have absolutely no idea what I am capable of. I took another sip of coffee and waited for the show to begin. The night was young, and I had a front row seat to their destruction. Kyle arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a silver hard case that looked like something out of a spy movie. I watched on my laptop screen as he strode into the living room, not with the caution of a thief, but with the arrogance of an owner. He did not even wipe his feet on the rug my late wife Ruby had hand-woven. He placed the case on my mahogany desk, right on top of the scratch Tiffany had made earlier, and popped the latches. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a device that made my engineer blood boil. It was a brute force decryptor, a nasty piece of hardware, illegal in 40 states, designed to cycle through millions of electronic combinations in minutes. It was the kind of tool used by professionals who did not care about finesse. They just wanted in. I sat in the dim light of the motel room, sipping my third cup of black coffee, watching them prepare to violate the last sanctuary I had left, my safe. The Titan 5000. It was not just a metal box. It was a vault of memories, and they treated it like a vending machine that had swallowed their dollar. Tiffany was practically vibrating with excitement. She poured another glass of my vintage wine, her hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. How long will it take Kyle? She asked, leaning over his shoulder. The old man is out cold, but I do not want to push our luck. Kyle connected 2 leads from the device to the electronic keypad of the safe. He adjusted a dial, and a low hum filled the room, audible even through the microphone on the wall. It depends on the complexity of the encryption, he said, his eyes fixed on the device's small screen. If he used a standard factory code, 5 minutes. If he got creative, maybe 20. But this baby never fails. It listens to the tumblers. It feels the voltage drop. It is smarter than any human engineer. I smirked at the screen. Smarter than me? We will see about that. I had built that safe into the foundation of the house myself. I knew its quirks. I knew that if you tried to force the electronic lock without disengaging the seismic sensors first, it would trigger a silent alarm. But I had disabled the external police alert remotely 10 minutes ago. I did not want the police interrupting the show. Yet, I wanted them to open it. I wanted them to see what was inside. "Start it," Tiffany commanded. Kyle flipped a switch. The safe let out a high-pitched whine. The red light on the keypad began to flash rapidly, like a strobe light in a nightclub. Beep, 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 beep. Jamal stood in the corner, biting his fingernails. He looked pale. Every time the safe beeped, he flinched, as if he expected an explosion. "Is it supposed to be that loud?" he whispered. "Relax," Kyle muttered. "It is cycling. Just watch the green light. When it turns green, we are rich." I leaned closer to my laptop. I remembered what was in that safe. I had not opened it in years, not since Ruby died. I knew exactly what they were expecting to find. Stacks of cash, gold bars, the Patek Philippe watch collection, the deeds to the commercial properties downtown. The beeping accelerated. The numbers on Kyle's device blurred. Come on," Tiffany hissed. She was pacing again, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, a staccato rhythm of greed. Suddenly the whining stopped. The room went dead silent. The light on the safe stopped flashing red. It stayed dark for a second, a long, breathless second. Then it turned a solid, steady green. Click, clack, thud. The heavy steel bolts retracted. The door popped open an inch, creaking on its hinges. "Yes!" Tiffany screamed. She actually jumped in the air. "We are in. We are absolutely in." She rushed forward, shoving Kyle aside. She grabbed the handle of the safe and pulled the heavy door all the way open. Jamal stepped forward, his eyes wide. Even Kyle leaned in, licking his lips. I watched their faces. This was the moment, the payoff. Tiffany reached inside her hands, trembling. "Where is the light?" she snapped. "I cannot see anything. It is dark in there." She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. She shone the beam into the cavernous interior of the Titan 5000. I saw her face change. It did not change to joy. It did not change to triumph. It froze. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Her eyes went wide, not with excitement, but with confusion. Pure, unadulterated confusion. She started clawing at the empty space inside the safe. She reached to the top shelf. Nothing. She reached to the bottom shelf. Nothing. "What is this?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "What is it?" Jamal asked, stepping closer. "How much is there? Is it enough to cover the debt?" Tiffany turned around slowly. In her hand, she held the only two items that were inside the safe. There was no money. There were no deeds. There were no watches. There was a faded yellow envelope and a plastic bag containing a set of cheap green toy soldiers. That was it. "What is the meaning of this?" Kyle barked, snatching the flashlight from her. He shoved his head into the safe, scanning every corner. "It is empty. The damn thing is empty. Where is the loot, Tiffany? You said he kept $1 million in liquid assets in here." Tiffany looked at the toy soldiers in her hand. She looked at them as if they were covered in slime. "These are toys," she stammered. "Why are there toys in a biometric safe?" I closed my eyes in the motel room, and a wave of nostalgia washed over me. Those were not just toys. Those were the Green Berets. When Jamal was 7 years old, I had lost my job at the first engineering firm. We were broke. We were eating beans and rice 3 times a day. Christmas was coming, and I had no money for gifts. I had sold my own watch, my father's watch, to buy that bag of plastic soldiers for Jamal. I remembered the look on his face that Christmas morning. He did not care that they were cheap. He played with them for hours, building forts in the living room, calling me General Dad. That bag of soldiers was the symbol of the only time I felt like a perfect father. It was the symbol of our struggle and our love. I kept it in the safe because it was more valuable to me than any gold bar. But to Tiffany, it was garbage. She let out a scream of primal rage, a sound so shrill it distorted the audio feed. She threw the bag of soldiers at Jamal. The bag hit him in the chest and burst open. Green plastic men scattered all over the floor. The sniper, the radio man, the commander. They clattered onto the hardwood, sliding under the furniture. "Are you kidding me?" she shrieked. "Are you actually kidding me right now?" Toys. He kept toys in a $10,000 safe. She ripped open the yellow envelope, hoping against hope that it contained a check or a bond. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a letter, handwritten. "Read it," Kyle commanded. "Maybe it is a map. Maybe he buried the money." Tiffany scanned the letter, her eyes darting back and forth. Her face turned red, then purple. "It is a love letter," she spat. "It is a damn love letter to his dead wife. Dear Ruby, today I laid the foundation for the new bridge." She crumpled the letter into a ball and threw it into the fireplace. "He is playing us," she screamed. She turned on Jamal and shoved him hard. "You said he was rich. You said he was loaded. You said this safe was the Holy Grail. Where is the money, Jamal? Where is my $5 million? Jamal looked down at the plastic soldiers at his feet. He picked one up. It was the guy with the bazooka. I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He remembered. For a second, just a second, he remembered Christmas of 1999. "Pop used to tell me these were his best men," Jamal whispered. "He said they guarded the treasure." "Shut up about the soldiers," Tiffany yelled. She grabbed a vase from the table and smashed it against the wall. "I do not care about his best men. I care about the guys who are going to break your legs if we do not come up with $500,000 by Friday." Kyle was already packing up his equipment. He looked disgusted. "This is a bust," he said, snapping the case shut. "I risked my license for a bag of toys. You two are amateurs." "Wait, Kyle," Tiffany pleaded, grabbing his arm. "Do not leave. He has to have the money somewhere else. The bank, the offshore accounts, we just looked in the wrong place." "I am not sticking around to find out," Kyle said, shaking her off. "Call me when you have something real. And Jamal, good luck with the loan sharks." Kyle walked out the front door, leaving it wide open. Tiffany stood there, heaving her chest, rising and falling. She turned her glare back to Jamal. "You lied to me," she hissed. "You told me the old man was hoarding cash. You told me we would be set for life." "I thought he was," Jamal stammered, backing away from her. "He drives a Cadillac. He owns this house. He has to have money, Tiff." "He is laughing at us," Tiffany said. Her voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. She looked around the room, her eyes wild. She looked at the camera lens in the corner of the ceiling. For a second, I thought she saw me. "He knew," she said. "Somehow he knew." She walked over to where Jamal was standing. She kicked the toy soldiers across the floor, sending them skittering into the darkness. "Pick them up," she ordered. "What?" Jamal asked. "Pick up the trash," she said, pointing at the toys. "If the old man comes home and sees his precious memories on the floor, he might get suspicious. We need to reset. We need a new plan." "What plan?" Jamal asked, his voice breaking. "The safe is empty, Tiff. It is over. We should just leave. We should just run." "Run where?" Tiffany laughed, a harsh, manic sound. "We have no money. We have no passports. They are in the safe deposit box at the bank, and we cannot get in there without him. We are trapped here, Jamal." She walked over to him and smoothed his collar. The gesture was possessive, not affectionate. "We are not leaving," she said, "and neither is he. If the money is not in the safe, it is in his head. He knows where the accounts are. He knows the passwords." She looked up at the ceiling toward my bedroom. "Is he still asleep?" she asked. "I think so," Jamal said. "Good," Tiffany said, "because when he wakes up we are going to have a little chat. A very long, very painful chat. Until he tells us exactly where the real treasure is buried." I sat back in my chair in the motel room. My coffee was cold. They had found the soldiers. They had found the letter. They had found the heart of Desmond King, and they had spat on it. I looked at the screen at my son on his knees, picking up the green plastic men one by one, under the watchful eye of his tormentor. "You are looking for treasure," I whispered. "You are holding it in your hands, son. You just do not know the value of anything that does not have a price tag." But Tiffany was right about one thing. The money was not in the house. It was safe. It was far away. And now that I knew they were willing to torture me to get it, I knew I had to escalate the war. I reached for my phone. It was time to introduce a new player to the game. If they wanted to play dirty, I would bring the mud. I dialed the number for the private security firm that monitored the perimeter of my estate. The silent alarm was off, but the external floodlights, those were manual. "It is time to shine a little light on the cockroaches," I said. I pressed the button on my app. Back at the house, the entire front lawn suddenly blazed with light. 5,000 watts of halogen security lamps turned night into day. Inside, Tiffany screamed as the light flooded through the windows, blinding them. "What is happening?" she yelled, shielding her eyes. "The police," Jamal cried, dropping the toys again. "It is the police." Not yet, I thought. Not yet. I watched them scramble like rats exposed to the sun. This was just the opening ceremony. The main event was about to begin. I sat in the darkness of room 104, watching the blue flame in my fireplace on the laptop screen. Tiffany had just thrown my letter to Ruby into the fire. I watched the paper curl and blacken the ink, turning into ash. That was not just a piece of paper. That was the first letter I wrote to Ruby from Vietnam, when I was just a scared 20-year-old soldier. It was the only piece of our history I kept in that safe, and she burned it like trash. They thought the safe was empty because they were looking for cash. They were looking for the wrong kind of currency. They looked at this house, at the cars, at the lifestyle, and they assumed I was the one who built this fortune. They assumed the structural engineer with the hard hat was the financial genius. They were wrong. It was Ruby. I took a sip of cold coffee and let the memory wash over me. Everyone saw Ruby as the sweet homemaker, the woman who baked pecan pies for the church bake sale and knitted scarves for the homeless. But they did not see what I saw every night at the kitchen table. While I was reviewing blueprints, Ruby was reading the Wall Street Journal. While other people were buying new cars in the 80s, Ruby was buying stock in companies nobody had heard of. Apple, Microsoft, Berkshire Hathaway. She had a mind like a steel trap. She turned my foreman salary into a legacy, and before she died, she made me promise one thing. She made me create the Ruby King Trust, an irrevocable trust that owned everything: the house, the land, the portfolio. I was just the trustee. Jamal was a beneficiary, but only under specific conditions. Conditions he had broken 1,000 times over. If they knew the truth, they would know that robbing the safe was useless. The wealth was locked behind a legal fortress that Ruby designed to protect our son from his own worst instincts. But they did not know, and ignorance is a dangerous thing. On the screen, the mood in the living room had shifted from disappointment to terror. Kyle the broker was not laughing anymore. He was pacing the length of the rug, checking his watch. "You two are wasting my time," he growled. He walked over to Jamal, who was still on his knees picking up the plastic soldiers. Kyle kicked the toy bucket, sending it skidding across the floor. "Listen to me and listen good," Kyle said, his voice low and menacing. "I did not come here for a play date. I came here for collateral. The people you owe Jamal, they are getting impatient. I owe them next week," Jamal stammered, standing up. "I have until the 1st of the month." Kyle laughed, a harsh barking sound. "That was before they found out you tried to skip town to Paris. Flight risks do not get grace periods. The timeline has moved up. You have until noon tomorrow." "Noon?" Tiffany shrieked. "That is impossible. The banks do not even open until 9. "Not my problem," Kyle said, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "You owe 500 grand, plus interest. If I do not have those deeds in my hand by 12 o'clock, I make a phone call. And the people who answer that call, they do not use lawyers. They use bone saws." Jamal turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. He looked like he was going to vomit. "Kyle, they will kill me," he whispered. "They will kill both of you," Kyle corrected coldly. "And they will probably burn this nice house down just to send a message. You have 12 hours. Figure it out." Kyle turned on his heel and walked out the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. Silence descended on the living room. It was the silence of a tomb. Jamal sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "We are dead, Tiff. We are actually dead." Tiffany stood by the fireplace, staring at the empty safe. The firelight danced on her face, making her look like a statue carved from ice. She was not crying. She was not panicking. She was thinking. I knew that look. It was the look she had when she convinced Jamal to quit his job. It was the look she had when she convinced him to mortgage his own truck to buy her a diamond necklace. It was the look of a predator spotting a wounded animal. "We are not dead," she said softly. Jamal looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Did you hear him? Noon tomorrow. We cannot get the deeds. Pop hid them. We do not know where they are. We do not need to find them," Tiffany said, turning slowly to face him. "We just need to become the people who can ask for new ones." "What are you talking about?" Jamal asked, wiping his nose. Tiffany walked over to the side table where she had placed the bottle of Xanax earlier. She picked it up, shaking it so the pills rattled. "Who holds the power in this family?" she asked. "Your father." "Why?" "Because he is the owner. He is the competent adult. But what happens if he stops being competent?" Jamal stared at her, confused. "He is sleeping, Tiff. He is not incompetent." "Not yet," Tiffany said. "But think about it, Jamal. He is 73. He lives alone. He has a history of heart trouble. What if suddenly his mind started to go? What if he became confused? Danger even." I leaned closer to the laptop screen, my blood running cold. I saw where she was going. It was a path so dark I could not believe she was willing to walk it. Dementia. Tiffany whispered the word like a spell. Sudden onset dementia. If we can prove he is losing his mind, if we can prove he is a danger to himself, we can file for emergency conservatorship. Conservatorship, Jamal repeated. Like legal guardianship. Exactly, Tiffany said, her eyes widening with excitement. We get a doctor to sign a paper saying Desmond King is mentally incapacitated. We take that paper to a judge tomorrow morning. We get an emergency order. Boom. You become his guardian. You get control of his assets, his accounts, his deeds. You sign the transfer yourself. Jamal shook his head. That takes weeks, Tiff. You need evaluations. You need court hearings. We have 12 hours. It takes weeks if you play by the rules, Tiffany said. But we are not playing by the rules anymore. I know a doctor, Dr. Miller. He lost his license last year for writing bad prescriptions, but he still has his stamp. He owes me a favor. For $5,000, he will write whatever diagnosis we want. She walked over to Jamal and knelt in front of him, placing her hands on his knees. But we need evidence, she said. We need the old man to look the part. When the notary comes tomorrow morning, Desmond needs to look crazy. He needs to look lost. He needs to look like he cannot even feed himself. How do we do that? Jamal asked. Tiffany smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. We help him along. We wake him up. We mess with his head. We move the furniture. We change the clocks. We keep him drugged just enough so he slurs his words, but not enough to knock him out. We gaslight him, Jamal. We make him believe he is losing his mind. And by tomorrow morning, when Dr. Miller walks in, your father will be a drooling mess. Jamal looked at the stairs leading up to my bedroom. But he is my dad, Tiff. He is an obstacle, Tiffany snapped, standing up. Do you want to be a good son? Or do you want to be alive at 12:01 tomorrow? Because Kyle is not bluffing. Jamal looked at her. Then he looked at the door where Kyle had exited. Fear won. Fear always wins with Jamal. Call Dr. Miller, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I sat back in the motel room, stunned. They were not just going to steal my money. They were going to steal my mind. They were going to strip away my dignity, my identity, and my freedom. They were going to use the legal system to turn me into a prisoner in my own body, just to pay off a gambling debt. I felt a tear run down my cheek, but I brushed it away angrily. Ruby, I whispered to the empty room. Did you hear that? They want to say I am crazy. I looked at the reflection in the mirror, the grease-stained coveralls, the tired eyes. I did look a little crazy, and then a thought occurred to me. A plan so bold, so risky that it made my hands steady again. You want crazy, I said to the screen. You want a confused old man who sees things that are not there. You want a performance. I stood up and began to pace the small room. If I stayed hiding in this motel, I could record them, but I could not stop them. The judge might believe a signed doctor's note over a video recording if I was not there to defend myself. And once a conservatorship is signed, it is a nightmare to undo. No, I had to go back. I had to walk right into the lion's den. I had to let them think their plan was working. I had to play the part of the senile old fool. I had to let them drug me, let them mock me, let them think they had won. Because only by being inside the house could I destroy them from within. I checked my watch. It was almost midnight. I packed my laptop. I put the burner phone in my pocket. I grabbed the bottle of caffeine pills. I was going home. But I was not going home to sleep. I was going home to haunt them. Tiffany wanted a show. She wanted to prove I was losing my mind. Well, daughter-in-law, I thought as I grabbed my keys. You were about to get the performance of a lifetime. But remember one thing. I looked at the image of the safe on the screen, the green light still glowing. The most dangerous person in the room is not the one who is shouting. It is the one who is listening. I opened the motel door and stepped out into the night. The humidity hit me like a physical weight. "I am coming for you," I whispered, "and I am bringing hell with me." I sat in my car parked down the street under the heavy shadow of an oak tree. The engine was off, but the laptop on the passenger seat was burning bright with the live stream from my living room. The time was 1:15 in the morning. Most people were sleeping. Most sons were safe in their beds. But my son was wide awake, hosting a demon in a suit. A black sedan had pulled up to the driveway 5 minutes ago. It was not a luxury car, but it was clean, nondescript, the kind of car that blends into traffic. Out stepped a man I recognized from the darkest rumors at the country club, Dr. Lawrence Miller. He was a psychiatrist who had lost his hospital privileges years ago for overprescribing opioids, but somehow managed to keep his medical license. He was the kind of doctor you called when you did not want to heal a patient, but when you wanted to fix a problem. I watched him walk into my house. He did not wipe his feet. He carried a leather briefcase that looked worn, like it had carried too many secrets and too much dirty money. Tiffany greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. A kiss. That told me everything. This was not a professional consultation. This was a conspiracy between old friends. "Dr. Miller," she said, her voice oozing charm. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Miller looked around the room, eyeing the expensive furniture and the open safe. He whistled low. "Nice place. I see why you are in a hurry to secure the perimeter." He walked over to my liquor cabinet and poured himself a glass of my scotch without asking. He took a sip and grimaced. "Single malt, smooth, just like this operation needs to be." He sat down at my dining table and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of legal forms and a heavy fountain pen. "All right, Tiffany," he said, getting straight to business. "You said on the phone that the subject is exhibiting signs of severe cognitive decline, aggression, confusion, inability to manage financial affairs. Subject, that was what I was to them now. Not a father, not a person, a subject." Tiffany sat opposite him. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Exactly. He is dangerous, Lawrence. Just tonight he forgot who we were. He thought Jamal was a burglar. He tried to attack us with a fireplace poker. We were terrified." I gripped the steering wheel of my car so hard the leather creaked. Lies. Vile, poisonous lies. Jamal was standing by the window, looking out at the darkness. He was not looking at the doctor. He could not even stomach his own treachery. Miller nodded, writing something down on his notepad. Paranoia, hallucinations, violent outbursts. That fits the profile for rapid onset dementia, or perhaps Alzheimer's with behavioral disturbance. He looked up at Tiffany. "To get an emergency conservatorship approved by a judge tomorrow morning, we need to be convincing. The court usually requires a mental evaluation, a standard test." "We do not have time for a test," Tiffany snapped. "We have a deadline at noon. We need you to certify that he is too far gone to be tested, that he is a danger to himself and others, that for his own safety, control must be transferred to his next of kin immediately." Miller tapped his pen on the table. He looked at Jamal, then back at Tiffany. "That is a heavy diagnosis, Tiffany. You are asking me to legally strip a man of his rights without even speaking to him. If the medical board finds out, I could go to jail." Tiffany smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "The medical board is not going to find out, Lawrence, because you are going to write the report based on your observation of him tonight. You are going to say you came for a house call and found him in a state of delirium. And what makes it worth the risk?" Miller asked, leaning back in my chair. Tiffany held up 5 fingers. 5,000, she said. Miller laughed. He actually laughed. He took another sip of my scotch. 5,000 might cover the gas money to get here, but for a signature that hands you the keys to a multi-million-dollar estate, you are insulting my intelligence. Tiffany's smile did not waver. "How much?" 50, Miller said. $50,000, cash. Jamal spun around from the window. 50 grand. We do not have 50 grand. That is why we are doing this. Miller shrugged. Then I guess you do not have a conservatorship, and I guess you do not get to sell those deeds tomorrow. And I guess whatever loan sharks are chasing you will just have to break your kneecaps. He started to pack his papers back into the briefcase. "Wait," Tiffany said. She looked at Jamal. Her eyes were hard, demanding compliance. "We will get you the money," she said to Miller. "Once the order is signed and we have access to his accounts, we will wire it to you." Miller paused. He looked at Tiffany, then at Jamal. "I want a post-dated check, signed by Jamal as the future conservator, and I want collateral." Tiffany took off her diamond engagement ring, the ring I had helped Jamal pay for. She slid it across the table. "Keep this until the wire clears. It is worth 20. Miller picked up the ring, examining it under the light. He nodded slowly. "Deal." He pulled the papers back out. "I need the son to sign the petition," he said. "He is the petitioner. I am just the medical expert. If this goes south, kid, you are the one going down for perjury. I am just a doctor who made a misdiagnosis." Miller pushed the paper toward Jamal. Jamal stared at the document. It was a single sheet of paper, but it weighed 1,000 tons. It was a declaration that his father, the man who raised him, the man who taught him to ride a bike, the man who paid for his college, was mentally incompetent. I watched my son on the screen. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a profound, aching sadness. "Do not do it, son," I whispered in the darkness of my car. "Do not cross this line. You can steal my money, you can break my heart, but do not take away my name. Do not tell the world I am broken just to save your own skin." Jamal picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. "He is not crazy, Tiff," he whispered. "He is just old. This feels wrong." Tiffany walked over to him. She put her hands on his shoulders, massaging them. She leaned down and whispered in his ear, but the microphone picked it up perfectly. "Do you want to go to prison, Jamal? Do you want to be poor? Or do you want to be the master of this house? Just sign the paper. It is just a signature. He will never know. We will put him in a nice home. He will be happy." Miller clicked his pen. "Tick-tock, kid." Jamal looked at Tiffany. He looked at the doctor. Then he looked at the empty safe. He took a deep breath, and he signed. I watched the ink flow onto the paper. I watched him sign away my freedom. Something inside me broke. It was a quiet break, like a structural beam finally giving way under too much weight. The love I had held for him, the hope I had nurtured, it all collapsed into a pile of dust. But as the dust settled, something else revealed itself underneath. Steel. Cold, hard, unyielding steel. I wiped the single tear from my cheek. I closed the laptop. "You want a crazy old man?" I said to the silence of the car. "You want a man who has lost his mind. A man who confuses reality with nightmare." I started the engine. The Cadillac purred to life, a low growl that sounded like a beast waking up. "Fine. I will give you the performance of a lifetime." I was not Desmond King the father anymore. I was not Desmond King the engineer. I was the character they had written. I was the chaotic element they claimed I was. I drove the car out from under the oak tree. I did not turn on the headlights. I let the car glide down the street like a ghost. I pulled into my own driveway, blocking the doctor's sedan. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the bottle of caffeine pills I had bought. I swallowed 2 more. My eyes were wide, my senses heightened. I ruffled my hair until it stood up in wild tufts. I unbuttoned my shirt, pulling it askew. I smeared a little grease from my tire iron onto my forehead. I looked in the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me looked deranged. He looked dangerous. He looked exactly like the monster Dr. Miller had described in his report. I stepped out of the car. The night air was thick and heavy. I walked to the front door. I did not use my key. I rang the doorbell. Once. Long and hard. Ding dong. I imagined the scene inside, the panic, the scrambling to hide the papers. I rang it again. And again. I started pounding on the door with my fist. "Ruby!" I screamed, my voice cracking perfectly. "Ruby, let me in. The bridge is falling, Ruby. The bridge is falling." I heard footsteps running inside. "Open the door!" I roared, kicking the wood. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Tiffany stood there, pale as a sheet. Jamal was behind her, hiding the papers behind his back. Dr. Miller was standing by the table, looking like he had seen a ghost. I stumbled inside, my eyes wild, scanning the room. "Who are you people?" I shouted, grabbing Tiffany by the shoulders. "Where is my wife? Where is Ruby? Tell me what you did with her." Tiffany looked at Dr. Miller. Her eyes said, "See, I told you," but she did not know. She did not know that the man shaking her was not lost. He was navigating, and he had just steered them all directly into the eye of the storm. I let go of her and collapsed onto the floor, sobbing loudly. "They stole the bridge," I wailed, pounding the floorboards. "They stole the bridge." Jamal stepped forward. "Dad, Dad, it is me, Jamal." I looked up at him. I looked right into his treacherous eyes. "I do not know you," I whispered, my voice trembling with fake fear. "Get away from me. You look like the man who stole my soldiers." I saw Jamal flinch. Good, I thought. Let it hurt, because the play has just begun. And in the final act, son, everybody pays. The engine of my Cadillac ticked as it cooled in the humid Atlanta night air, but my own internal temperature was rising. I sat behind the wheel for a moment longer, watching the front door of the house I had built with my own hands. Inside that house, 3 people were conspiring to erase my existence. My son Jamal, his wife Tiffany, and Dr. Miller, a man who had traded his Hippocratic oath for a quick payday. They had the papers ready. They had the lies rehearsed. All they needed was the madman. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror one last time. I had unbuttoned my shirt, leaving it hanging loose and sloppy over my chest. I had rubbed grease from the tire iron onto my forehead and cheeks, giving me the look of a man who had been wandering aimlessly. I ruffled my gray hair until it stood up in wild tufts. But the most important change was in my eyes. I had to extinguish the spark of intelligence. I had to dim the light of the engineer who could calculate load-bearing stress in his sleep and replace it with the vacant, foggy stare of a man lost in the corridors of his own mind. I popped 2 more caffeine pills, dry swallowing them. I needed my heart to race. I needed my hands to tremble not from fear, but from a chemical jitter that would mimic a nervous breakdown. "It is showtime, Desmond," I whispered to my reflection. "Do not let them see the steel. Show them only the rust." I stepped out of the car. I did not walk with my usual military upright posture. I shuffled. I dragged my left foot slightly, a physical affectation I had seen in stroke victims. I made my way up the driveway, mumbling to myself loud enough to be heard, but incoherent enough to be dismissed. I reached the front door. I did not use my key. A man who forgets his own name does not remember his keys. I raised my fist and pounded on the wood. "Ruby!" I shouted, my voice cracking with a desperate, confused urgency. "Ruby, open the door. The rain is coming. The bridge is not finished." I pounded again. "Ruby, where are you? They are trying to pour the concrete too wet, Ruby. Let me in." The door swung open instantly. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the door frame. The sudden movement made me dizzy, which only helped the performance. I looked up. Standing there were the 3 conspirators. Tiffany looked pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and anticipation. Jamal was hiding something behind his back, undoubtedly the commitment papers. Dr. Miller stood by the dining table, a glass of my scotch halfway to his mouth. I blinked rapidly, letting my eyes dart around the room without focusing on any of them. I looked through them as if they were ghosts. "Who are you people?" I asked, my voice trembling. I backed away, bumping into the coat rack. "Where is Ruby? I told her to wait for me. We have reservations at the diner. Why are there strangers in my house?" "Dad." Jamal stepped forward, his hand reaching out. "Dad, it is me. It is Jamal." I swatted his hand away. I looked at him with a look of pure, terrified recognition, not of a son, but of a threat. "I do not know you," I screamed. "You look like the foreman, the one who stole my tools. Get away from me." "Where is my wife?" I saw Jamal flinch, physically recoiling from my rejection. "Good. Let it hurt. Let every word be a dagger in the heart of your betrayal." Tiffany, however, did not look hurt. As I scanned the room, pretending to search for my dead wife, I saw her reaction out of the corner of my eye. She turned to Dr. Miller, and a slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She gave a subtle nod, almost a wink. "See," she seemed to be saying, "I told you. The old man is gone." Dr. Miller set his glass down and stepped into his role. He approached me slowly, putting on his professional mask, the predator disguised as a healer. "Mr. King," he said, his voice dripping with fake soothing tones, "I am a doctor. I am here to help you. Do you know what year it is?" I looked at him, narrowing my eyes. I looked at his expensive suit, his manicured hands. "It is 1985, I spat out, "and you are trespassing. Get out before I call the union rep." 1985. The year Jamal was born. The year I started my own firm. It was a calculated wrong answer. Close enough to show memory, but far enough to prove incompetence. Miller turned to Tiffany and whispered loud enough for me to hear. Disorientation, temporal displacement. He is living in the past. This is classic. Tiffany walked over to me. She moved with the confidence of someone who has already won the lottery and is just waiting to cash the ticket. Desmond, she said, using my first name without the honorific dad. A deliberate sign of disrespect. Ruby is not here. Ruby went to the store. Why do you not sit down? You look tired. I looked at her. I hated her in that moment more than I had ever hated anyone in my life. But I let my shoulders slump. I let the fight drain out of me. The store, I mumbled. She went to the store. Yes, she needs milk. I let them lead me to the sofa, the same sofa where they had plotted to rob me just an hour ago. I sank into the cushions, clutching a throw pillow to my chest like a child clutching a teddy bear. Jamal stood over me, still holding the papers behind his back. He looked sick. He looked like he wanted to vomit. Is he always like this? Dr. Miller asked Tiffany. This is the worst I have seen him, Tiffany lied smoothly. Usually he just forgets where he put his glasses. But tonight he was violent. He tried to hit me. He thought I was an intruder. I sat there rocking back and forth, humming a tune under my breath. It was an old gospel song Ruby used to sing. Precious Lord, take my hand. Jamal wiped sweat from his forehead. He is not crazy, Tiff. Maybe he is just tired. Maybe it is a reaction to the medication. Tiffany spun on him, her eyes flashing dangerous fire. Look at him, Jamal. He thinks it is 1985. He thinks your mother is shopping for milk. Your mother has been dead for 5 years. Do you want him to wander out into traffic? Do you want him to burn the house down? We are doing this to protect him. She snatched the papers from Jamal's hand and thrust them at Dr. Miller. Write it up, she commanded. Rapid onset dementia, incapable of self-care, immediate transfer of guardianship. Dr. Miller looked at me one last time. I stared blankly at the fireplace, drooling slightly out of the corner of my mouth. I made my left hand tremor uncontrollably. It is clear as day, Miller said, pulling out his pen. The man is gone. The lights are on, but nobody is home. I will sign the affidavit. You can take this to the judge first thing in the morning. I listened to the scratch of the pen on paper. It sounded like a shovel digging a grave, my grave. But graves are for the dead, and I was very much alive. I watched through lowered eyelids as Miller signed his name. He stamped the document with his official seal. Done, he said, handing the papers to Tiffany. You are the legal guardian, pending the court order. But with this medical evaluation, no judge in Georgia will deny you. Tiffany held the papers to her chest. She looked at the safe in the corner, the safe she could not open. Now we have the key, she whispered. She turned to me. Her face softened into a mask of fake concern. Dad, she said, do you trust me? I looked up at her. I let a tear leak out of my eye. I want Ruby, I whimpered. Ruby is gone, Dad, Tiffany said, and I could hear the glee in her voice. But Jamal and I are here. We are going to take care of everything. You do not have to worry about bills or banks or bridges anymore. We will handle it, she signaled to Jamal. Get him a glass of water, she said, and put 2 of those pills in it, the blue ones. He needs to sleep until the notary gets here. Jamal hesitated. Do it, Tiffany hissed. Jamal went to the kitchen. I heard the tap running. I heard the rattle of the pill bottle. My son, my flesh and blood. He was preparing a chemical cocktail to silence his own father. I sat there, continuing my rocking motion. My mind was racing. I had achieved the first step. They believed the lie. They had lowered their guard. They thought they were dealing with a broken machine, not a master engineer. But now came the dangerous part. I had to fake taking the pills. I had to fake the coma. And then, when they were busy celebrating their victory, I had to strike. Jamal came back with the water. The glass was cloudy. Here, Pop, he said, his voice shaking. Drink this. It will help you find Ruby. That line almost made me break character. It will help you find Ruby. He was using my dead wife, his own mother, to manipulate me into sedation. I took the glass. My hands trembled, spilling some water on my shirt. Thank you, Foreman, I mumbled. I raised the glass to my lips. Drink up, old man, Tiffany thought loud and clear in her expression. Drink up and die. I pretended to cough. I brought my hand to my mouth violently, as if choking. In the confusion, I splashed the rest of the water onto the rug. Oops, I said, wiping my mouth. Spilled. Clumsy. Tiffany rolled her eyes. It is fine, she said. He got enough down. Just let him rest. She pushed me back onto the pillows. Go to sleep, Desmond. Tomorrow is a big day. I closed my eyes. I let my breathing slow down. I let my jaw go slack. I listened as they walked away from the sofa. I listened to the clink of glasses as they poured more scotch to celebrate. He is out, Tiffany said. That was easier than I thought, Miller laughed. 50,000. Do not forget. I will wire it tomorrow, Tiffany promised, once we liquidate the portfolio. I lay there in the darkness of my own living room, surrounded by enemies pretending to be a vegetable. But inside, the furnace was roaring. They had the papers. They had the diagnosis. They thought they had the power. But they forgot one thing. Paper burns. And I was the one holding the match. I waited. I counted their heartbeats. I counted their breaths. I was not sleeping. I was calibrating. And when I woke up, the nightmare would not be mine. It would be theirs. The smell of roasted garlic and heavy cream drifted from the kitchen. But to me, it smelled like betrayal. I sat at the head of my own dining table, clutching a spoon with a trembling hand, staring at the empty placemat where Ruby used to sit. My performance as the senile old man had bought me a seat at the table, but I knew the main course was going to be lethal. Tiffany was in the kitchen humming to herself. It was a cheerful melody that clashed violently with the sinister reality of the evening. She was stirring a pot of potato leek soup. I knew why she chose that dish. It was thick, creamy, opaque, the perfect vehicle to hide the crushed powder of the sedative she had taken from the medicine cabinet. She wanted me compliant. She wanted me quiet. She wanted me to sleep through the notary visit in the morning so she could guide my hand to sign away my life without resistance. Jamal sat across from me. He was scrolling through his phone, probably checking the odds on a game or looking up flight prices to Paris. He avoided making eye contact. Shame has a way of making a man look at his shoes or his screen, anything but the eyes of the father he is selling out. Dinner is served, Tiffany announced, breezing into the dining room with a porcelain tureen. She looked like the perfect hostess in her designer dress, but her eyes were cold and calculating. She did not serve from the tureen at the table. She had already ladled the soup into bowls in the kitchen. She placed a bowl in front of Jamal. Then she walked around the table and placed a bowl in front of me. "Here you go, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Nice hot soup. It will help you sleep." I looked down at the bowl. There were a few croutons floating on top and a swirl of olive oil. But I noticed something else. A tiny, almost imperceptible residue of white powder on the rim of the bowl, where she had wiped it hastily. An engineer notices details. An engineer notices the stress fractures before the collapse. "Thank you, nurse," I mumbled, keeping my head down. "Is there concrete in this? I need concrete for the pilings." Tiffany sighed loudly, rolling her eyes at Jamal. "Just eat it, Desmond. It is not concrete. It is potatoes." She sat down at her own place, but she did not eat. She watched me. Her gaze was intense, predatory. She was waiting for me to take the first spoonful. She was waiting for the chemical cocktail to hit my bloodstream. I picked up my spoon. My hand shook violently, splashing a little soup onto the tablecloth. "Careful, Dad," Jamal said, reaching out a hand, but stopping short of touching me. I lifted the spoon to my lips. I smelled the steam. It smelled delicious. It smelled like death. "I cannot eat this," I shouted suddenly, dropping the spoon back into the bowl with a loud clatter. Tiffany jumped. "What is wrong now?" she snapped. "The spiders," I yelled, pointing at the bowl with a shaking finger. "There are spiders in the soup. Ruby hates spiders. Get them out." I stood up, knocking my chair back. I grabbed the bowl with both hands. Tiffany stood up too, her face twisting in anger. "Sit down, old man. There are no spiders." "Get them off me," I screamed, and then I executed the maneuver I had planned the moment she walked in. I pretended to trip over my own feet. I lunged forward, thrusting the bowl of hot soup directly toward Tiffany. It was not a gentle spill, it was a deluge. The thick, creamy liquid hit her square in the chest, soaking into her silk blouse and splashing up onto her neck. "Ah!" she shrieked, jumping back and knocking her chair over. "You crazy old bat, you burned me." She frantically tried to wipe the hot soup off her clothes, but it only smeared, making a massive stain. "My dress," she screamed. "This is Italian silk. Jamal, do something." Jamal jumped up and ran to her, grabbing a napkin. "Are you okay, Tiff? Is it burned?" "Get away from me," she yelled, pushing him aside. "I need cold water." She turned and ran toward the kitchen sink, her heels clicking furiously on the hardwood. Jamal followed her, instinctively, the obedient puppy trailing his master. For 3 seconds, I was alone in the dining room. 3 seconds is a lifetime for a structural engineer. I stopped shaking, my posture straightened. My hand moved with the precision of a machine. I reached across the table. I grabbed Jamal's bowl of soup. I slid my bowl, the one that I had barely spilled from, into his place. I put his pristine, undrugged bowl in front of me. The switch took less than 2 seconds. I sat back down, huddled over the new bowl, and started rocking back and forth again, resuming my chant about the spiders. By the time Tiffany and Jamal returned, wiping water off her ruined blouse, the crime scene had been altered. The weapon was now pointing at the executioner. "Look at him," Tiffany hissed, pointing a wet finger at me. "He is eating it. After all that drama, he is eating it." I was shoveling the soup into my mouth, slurping loudly, wiping my chin with my sleeve. It was delicious, and it tasted even better knowing it was clean. "Sit down and eat, Jamal," she ordered. "I am not changing again. We have a long night ahead of us. I need you to stay awake and watch him while I go through the files in the study." Jamal sat down. He looked at the bowl in front of him. My bowl. The poisoned bowl. "I am kind of hungry," he admitted. He picked up his spoon. I watched him from beneath my bushy eyebrows. My heart gave a little squeeze. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to slap the spoon out of his hand and tell him to run. He was my son. But then I remembered the conversation I had heard earlier. I remembered him signing the paper to have me committed. I remembered him agreeing to put me in a home. He had made his choice. Now he had to swallow the consequences. Jamal took a bite, then another. "This is good, Tiff," he said. "Needs a little salt, though." Tiffany glared at him. "Just eat, and make sure he finishes his. We need that medication to kick in within 20 minutes. I scraped the bottom of my bowl. "I am done, nurse," I announced, holding up the empty bowl. "No more spiders." "Good," Tiffany said. "Now sit there and be quiet." 5 minutes passed. I watched the clock on the wall. Jamal was halfway through his bowl when his movement started to slow down. He blinked hard, shaking his head as if trying to clear a fog. "Man," he mumbled, slurring his words slightly. "Is it hot in here? I feel dizzy." Tiffany did not look up from her phone. "It is the wine, Jamal. You drank half a bottle earlier. Just finish your food." Jamal dropped his spoon. It clattered loudly against the china. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes unfocused. I do not feel good," he whispered. "My legs feel like lead." I watched him closely. The dosage she had put in there must have been massive, meant to knock out a 200-pound man for 12 hours. Jamal was about the same weight as me, but he had no tolerance. Suddenly, his head lolled forward, his chin hit his chest. "Jamal." Tiffany snapped, looking up. "Stop playing around." Jamal did not answer. He let out a low groan, and then his upper body slumped forward, crashing onto the table. His face landed right next to the soup bowl. Thud. The sound echoed through the dining room. Tiffany stood up so fast her chair fell over again. "Jamal," she shouted. She ran over to him and shook his shoulder. "Jamal, wake up." He did not move. He was out cold, breathing heavily, a deep, rhythmic snoring that sounded like a generator. "What is wrong with him?" she cried. She grabbed his face, lifting it up. His eyes were rolled back in his head. He was dead weight. She looked at the empty bowl in front of him. Then she looked at the empty bowl in front of me. She looked at me. I was staring at the ceiling, humming a tune, twirling my thumbs innocently. "Did he eat the spiders?" I asked, my voice full of childlike curiosity. "The spiders make you sleepy," Ruby said. "Never eat the spiders." Tiffany's face went white. She looked back at the soup tureen, then at the bowls. Her mind was racing, trying to figure out what happened. Did she mix them up? Did she put the powder in the wrong bowl? "No," she whispered. I marked it. I know I marked it. She grabbed Jamal's wrist, checking his pulse. It was slow and steady, the pulse of a man in a deep, chemically induced coma. He took the pills, she gasped. He ate the whole dose. Panic set in. Real, raw panic. She looked at her phone. Her thumb hovered over the emergency dial. But she froze. She could not call 911. If the paramedics came, they would pump his stomach. They would find high levels of unauthorized prescription sedatives. They would ask questions. Why was her husband drugged? Why was her father-in-law acting senile? The police would come back. The plan would be exposed. She was trapped. "Damn it," she screamed, kicking the table leg. "Damn it, Jamal, you useless idiot." She looked at me. I offered her a gummy smile. "The foreman is sleeping on the job," I said. "I am going to report him." "Shut up," Tiffany yelled. "Just shut up." She grabbed Jamal under the armpits, trying to hoist him up. He was dead weight, a sack of potatoes in a designer suit. She grunted, straining her back, her heels slipping on the floor. "Get up, Jamal," she pleaded. "You have to get up. I cannot carry you." But Jamal was gone. He was visiting the land of dreams, courtesy of his wife's own poison. She had to drag him. I watched with immense satisfaction as she struggled to pull him across the floor. She dragged him out of the dining room, his expensive Italian loafers scraping against the hard wood. She was panting, sweating, her ruined silk blouse clinging to her skin. I sat there quietly, finishing my water. One enemy down, one to go. She was exhausted. She was panicked. And now she was alone in the house with a man she thought was crazy. She finally managed to drag him to the bottom of the stairs, but she could not get him up. She left him there, slumped on the bottom step like a discarded marionette. She stormed back into the dining room, breathless and furious. She pointed a finger at me. "You," she hissed. "You stay right here. If you move 1 inch, I will tie you to this chair." "I am waiting for Ruby," I said calmly. "She is bringing the dessert." Tiffany let out a scream of frustration and ran into the kitchen, presumably to find some coffee or cold water to wake Jamal up. I waited until she was out of sight. Then I stood up. I walked over to the hallway where Jamal was snoring. I reached into his jacket pocket. I pulled out his keys and his phone. I went back to the table and sat down just as she returned with a bucket of ice water. She ran past me toward the stairs. Good luck with that, I thought. The night was turning out to be quite productive. I had the keys to their escape vehicle. I had their communication device. And I had the house to myself while she played nurse to the victim of her own malice. I picked up my spoon again and tapped it gently on the table. Ding, ding, ding. Round 2 was about to begin, and this time, the gloves were coming off. The house was quiet now, except for the heavy rhythmic thumping coming from the hallway. It was the sound of Tiffany trying to drag a 200-pound man up a flight of hardwood stairs in stilettos. I listened to her grunts of exertion and her whispered curses. She was distracted. She was exhausted. She was occupied. The moment she turned the corner of the landing, dragging Jamal's dead weight out of sight, I dropped the act. The tremors in my hands vanished. The hunch in my back straightened. The vacant look in my eyes sharpened into the focused glare of a structural engineer, assessing a critical failure. I did not have much time. Maybe 10 minutes before she came back down to check on her prisoner. I moved silently across the Persian rug. My socks made no sound. I was not Desmond the senile father. I was Desmond the soldier. I was Desmond the man who had built skyscrapers, and I knew that every structure has a blueprint. Even a criminal conspiracy has documentation. I slipped into the guest room down the hall. This was the room Jamal and Tiffany used as their office whenever they deigned to visit. It smelled of Jamal's expensive cologne and the stale scent of desperation. The room was a mess. Clothes were thrown over chairs. Fast food wrappers cluttered the desk. It was the workspace of a chaotic mind. But sitting right in the center of the chaos was the glowing Apple logo of Jamal's laptop. He had left it open. Of course he had. He was arrogant. He thought I was too old to understand technology, and he thought his wife was too busy plotting to check his browser history. I sat down in the chair. It groaned slightly, and I froze waiting to see if the noise had traveled. Silence from upstairs. I turned my attention to the screen. It was not password protected. Another mistake. A fatal mistake. I expected to find gambling sites. I expected to find emails from loan sharks, or maybe a secret bank account with a negative balance. And I did find those things. They were there in the open tabs, screaming of a life spiraling out of control. But as I dug deeper, as I opened the minimized spreadsheets, I found something far worse. I found a company called King Logistics, LLC. I had never heard of this company. I checked the incorporation documents saved in a folder. It was registered 6 months ago. The CEO was Jamal King. I opened the financial ledger. My eyes scanned the rows and columns with the speed of a man who has reviewed construction budgets for 40 years. Invoices for 300 tons of concrete, payments for heavy machinery rentals, payroll for 20 subcontractors. I frowned. Jamal was unemployed. He did not have a construction site. He did not have a contract. So where was this concrete going? Who were these workers? I looked at the dates of the deposits. Every Friday, $50,000 came in from a shell corporation in Miami. Every Monday, $50,000 went out to pay for materials that were never delivered and workers who did not exist. My blood ran cold. This was not just gambling debt. This was laundering. I recognized the pattern. It is called layering. You take dirty money from drug trafficking or racketeering. You funnel it through a legitimate-looking construction business. You pay fake expenses, and the money comes out clean on the other side. Jamal was washing money for a gang. I clicked on a folder named Contracts. I found scanned PDFs signed by men with names I recognized from the crime blotters in the newspaper. My son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had sent to Sunday school. He was not just a failure, he was a felon. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Gambling is a vice, it can be treated. Debt is a hole, it can be filled. But this was federal. This was RICO Act territory. If the FBI saw this, Jamal would not just go to jail. He would go to federal prison for 20 years. He would be an old man when he got out. I sat there in the dark room, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the tears forming in my eyes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive I always carried on my keychain. It was a habit from work. Back up your data. Always back up your data. I plugged it into the side of the laptop. A window popped up. I selected the folders. King Logistics, the gambling debts, the emails with Tiffany planning the conservatorship. I dragged them to the USB drive. A progress bar appeared. Copying items. Time remaining, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I stared at that green bar inching forward. Every pixel was a nail in my son's coffin. I looked at the photo on Jamal's desktop background. It was a picture of him and me from 10 years ago. We were standing on the completed deck of the suspension bridge I had designed. We were both wearing hard hats. He was smiling. I was smiling. I had his arm around my shoulder. I remembered that day. He had told me, "Dad, I want to be like you. I want to build things that last." Where did it go wrong? Was it the money? Was it Tiffany? Was it me? Did I work too much? Did I push him too hard? The progress bar hit 50%. I heard a noise upstairs. A door slamming. Footsteps pacing overhead. Tiffany was coming back. My finger hovered over the cancel button. I could stop this. I could pull the drive. I could delete the files. I could wipe the hard drive. I could save him. If I destroyed this evidence, the FBI would never know. I could pay off his gambling debts. I could sell the lake house. I could bail him out one last time. He is my son, my only son, Ruby's son. If I let this copy finish, I am signing his death warrant. I am sending my own child to the wolves. I trembled. The father in me was screaming, "Protect him, hide him, fix it." That is what fathers do. We fix the mistakes our children make. But the engineer in me spoke louder. You cannot fix a building with a rotten foundation. If you paint over the cracks, the collapse will only be more catastrophic when it happens. Jamal had chosen this. He had chosen the easy money. He had chosen the lies. And tonight, he had chosen to drug his own father and steal his dignity. He was not the boy in the hard hat anymore. He was a man who had made a deal with the devil. And if I saved him now, he would only do it again. Next time, he might not just launder money. Next time, he might hurt someone. Next time, he might kill someone. I looked at the progress bar. 90%. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Tiffany was coming down. "Desmond," she called out, her voice echoing in the empty house. "Are you still in your chair?" I did not answer. 95%. Come on, I whispered. Come on. 98, 99, complete. I yanked the USB drive out of the port. I shoved it deep into my pocket next to the caffeine pills. I closed the windows on the screen. I wiped the browser history for the last 10 minutes. I left the gambling tabs open just as I found them. I stood up. My knees cracked. I took one last look at the room. This was the room where my son had sold his soul. I slipped out into the hallway. I made it back to the dining room chair just as Tiffany rounded the corner. I slumped forward my head on the table, drooling slightly onto the placemat. "There you are," she said, sounding out of breath and irritable. "I thought you wandered off." I looked up at her, blinking slowly. "The foreman is gone," I mumbled. "The foreman went to sleep." "Yes, he did," Tiffany said, smoothing her hair. "He is sleeping like a baby. And now it is your turn." She walked over to me. She smelled of sweat and expensive perfume, a combination that made me want to gag. "Come on, Desmond," she said, grabbing my arm. "Let's get you to the sofa. You need to rest up for tomorrow." I let her lead me. I shuffled my feet. I leaned my weight on her, forcing her to struggle. I felt the hard plastic of the USB drive pressing against my thigh. It burned. It felt heavy, heavier than concrete, heavier than steel. It was the weight of a father's duty. I had the evidence. I had the weapon that would destroy them both. But as I lay down on the sofa and listened to Tiffany lock the front door, I did not feel like a victor. I felt like a man who had just cut off his own limb to save the body. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep, but in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw the bridge I built with Jamal, and I watched it crumble into the sea, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but deep, dark water. Tomorrow the world would see justice, but tonight, I just wanted to mourn the boy who used to want to be like me. The morning sun sliced through the plantation shutters of the dining room, casting long bars of light across the mahogany table like the bars of a prison cell. It was 8 in the morning, but the house felt heavy with the stale air of secrets and unwashed guilt. I sat at the head of the table, wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the night before, my hair still wild and unkempt. I was playing the part of the confused geriatric, but my mind was as clear as the crystal chandelier hanging above us. Jamal was sitting to my right. He looked terrible. The drug cocktail Tiffany had fed him the night before had done its job, but the hangover was brutal. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin was gray, and his hands shook as he lifted his coffee mug. He looked like a man who had gone 12 rounds with a prize fighter and lost. In a way he had. He had fought his own conscience, and his conscience was currently lying on the floor bleeding out. Tiffany was not in the room yet. I could hear her upstairs putting on her war paint. The click-clack of her heels on the hardwood floor sounded like a countdown. I knew I only had a few minutes. This was it. The final junction before the train went off the rails. The engineer in me knew that every catastrophic failure begins with a series of ignored warnings. I had ignored the cracks in my son's character for years, but today I was going to give him one last chance to reinforce the foundation. I tapped my spoon against my saucer. The sound was sharp and irritating. I did it again. Jamal flinched. He put his coffee cup down hard, coffee sloshing over the rim. "Stop it, Pop," he snapped, rubbing his temples. "My head is splitting." I stopped tapping. I looked at him. I did not give him the blank stare of the dementia patient I was pretending to be. I gave him a look that was soft, searching, and achingly familiar. I summoned the ghost of the father I used to be, the father who bandaged scraped knees and chased away nightmares. "Jamal," I said softly. My voice was steady, not trembling like it had been the night before. He looked up, surprised by the clarity in my tone. "Jamal, do you remember the red Schwinn?" He frowned, confused. "What?" "The red bicycle," I continued, leaning forward. "You were 7 years old. We lived in that small rental on Oak Street before I got the big contract. You wanted that bike more than anything in the world. But when I finally bought it for you, you were terrified to ride it." Jamal stared at me. The irritation in his face softened into confusion. "Yeah, I remember," I nodded. "You were scared of falling. You sat on that seat, your knuckles white, gripping the handlebars, and you cried. You said, 'Dad, do not let go. Promise me you won't let go.'" I saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, a memory breaking through the fog of greed and debt. "And what did I say, son?" Jamal looked down at his coffee. You said I have got you. You said you would hold the seat until I was ready. And I did, I whispered. I ran behind you for 3 blocks. My lungs were burning. My shoes were slapping against the pavement. But I did not let go. Not until I felt you find your balance. Not until I knew you could steer on your own. I reached out and placed my hand on his. His skin was cold and clammy. I am still holding the seat, Jamal. He pulled his hand away, but he did not do it angrily. He did it out of shame. He looked at me, and for a second, the 32-year-old man vanished, and I saw the 7-year-old boy who was afraid of the world. Pop, why are you talking about this? He asked, his voice cracking. Tiff said she said you were gone. She said you did not know who we were. I ignored his question. I kept my eyes locked on his. Con men and liars take shortcuts, son, but a structural engineer knows there are no shortcuts. If you build on sand, the house falls. You are building on sand right now, Jamal. I saw his lip tremble. He looked at the door, checking for Tiffany. He was scared. He was terrified of the woman upstairs, but he was also terrified of the truth I was speaking. Dad, he whispered. I messed up. I know I said gentle, but firm. I know about the money. I know you are scared. He froze. His eyes went wide. You know. I leaned in closer. My voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I am your father. I know when you are hurting. Is it money, Jamal? Do you need money? He nodded, tears welling up in his bloodshot eyes. It is bad, Pop. It is really bad. They are going to hurt me. Then ask me, I said. Just ask me. Do not steal from me. Do not let that woman turn you into a criminal. If you need help, tell me right now. We can fix this. I have resources. I can make the bad men go away. But you have to stop this. You have to stop this charade right now. This was the moment. The load-bearing beam was groaning under the weight. He could either reinforce it with truth or let it snap. Jamal looked at me. I saw the hope in his eyes. He opened his mouth. Dad, I owe 500 grand. I did something stupid. He was about to confess. He was about to grab the lifeline I had thrown him. I was ready to forgive him. I was ready to cancel the bridge claw protocol. I was ready to be his father again. And then the kitchen door swung open. Tiffany marched in. She was wearing a sharp navy blue business suit that made her look like a prosecuting attorney. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her perfume hit the room like a chemical weapon. She took one look at us. She saw Jamal leaning in. She saw the tears in his eyes. She saw the intensity in my face. She did not ask what was happening. She knew. She smelled the weakness. What is going on here? She barked, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. Jamal jumped back as if he had been electrocuted. He wiped his eyes frantically. Nothing, Tiff. We were just... Pop was talking about my old bike. Tiffany glared at me. Her eyes were cold, dead things. She looked at me with such contempt that I wondered how I had ever let her into my family. Oh, really? She sneered. A minute ago, he thought it was 1985, and now he is strolling down memory lane. It is called a moment of lucidity, Jamal. It happens right before the brain turns completely to mush. Don't let him manipulate you. She walked over to Jamal and put her hands on his shoulders. Her grip looked painful. Did he tell you he loves you? She asked, her voice mocking. Did he tell you he would do anything for you? That is what they all say, right before they forget your name and burn the house down. She leaned down and whispered in his ear, but her eyes were locked on mine. Remember the deadline, Jamal. Noon. Kyle is waiting. The bone saw is waiting. Jamal paled. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. The 7-year-old boy on the bike vanished. The desperate gambler returned. He looked at me. I looked back, silently pleading. Choose me, son. Choose honor. Jamal swallowed hard. He looked at Tiffany, then at the papers on the table. The papers that would declare me incompetent. The papers that would steal my life. He took a deep breath, and he looked away. He is talking nonsense, Tiff Jamal said, his voice flat and dead. He is just rambling about a red bike. I never had a red bike. My heart stopped. He lied. He looked me in the eye and erased our history to save his own skin. Tiffany smiled. A cruel, victorious smile. That is what I thought she said. She pushed the papers toward me. She placed a pen in my trembling hand. "Here, Dad," she said loud and slow, as if speaking to a toddler. "Since you are having a good morning, let's get some paperwork done. This is just for your medical insurance. We need to get you some better medicine for that head of yours." I looked at the paper. It was the petition for emergency conservatorship. I looked at Jamal. "Son," I said, my voice breaking. Not acting this time, truly breaking. "The bike was red. You named it Rocket. Do not do this." Jamal stood up. He could not sit there anymore. He turned his back to me. "Just sign the paper, old man," he muttered. "Stop making it difficult. We are trying to help you." The door slammed shut. I heard the heavy steel door of the vault in my heart clang close. The lock spun. The tumblers clicked into place. I had given him the chance. I had offered him redemption on a silver platter, and he had slapped it out of my hand. He was not a victim anymore. He was a co-conspirator. I looked down at the paper. "Okay," I whispered, letting the tremor return to my hands. "Okay, nurse. I will sign. I want the medicine. I want the spiders to go away." Tiffany tapped the signature line. "Right here, Desmond." I gripped the pen. I let my hand shake violently, making the tip of the pen dance across the paper. I signed. But I did not sign Desmond King. I scribbled a jagged, illegible mess that looked like the wanderings of a broken mind. To them, it looked like victory. To me, it looked like a declaration of war. "Good boy," Tiffany said, snatching the paper away. "See, that was not so hard." She handed the paper to Jamal. "Go put this in your bag," she ordered. "The notary will be here in 20 minutes to witness the rest. We are almost there, baby." Jamal took the paper. He did not look at me. He walked out of the room, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his sin. Tiffany looked at me one last time. "You act all high and mighty," she said softly, "just for me. But in the end, you are just a signature on a page. Enjoy your oatmeal, Desmond. It is the last meal you will eat as a free man." She turned and clicked her way out of the room. I sat alone in the sunlight. I picked up my coffee. It was cold. I drank it anyway. I checked my internal clock. The USB drive with the evidence of money laundering was safe in my pocket. The bridge claw protocol was armed and ready at the lawyer's office. The police were on standby, waiting for my signal. I had hoped I would not have to use them. I had hoped that love would be stronger than greed. I was wrong. I stood up slowly. The time for sentiment was over. The time for demolition had begun. "I am sorry, son," I whispered to the empty room, "but you just condemned yourself." I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. A car was pulling up. The notary. Let them come. Let them all come. I was ready to burn it all down. The dining room table had been transformed into a slaughterhouse, where the victim was still breathing, and the butchers were wearing expensive perfume. I sat at the head of the table, my hands resting on the cold mahogany surface, playing the part of the vegetable they so desperately wanted me to be. The stage was set for the final act of their conspiracy. Tiffany had arranged the papers in neat stacks: the petition for emergency conservatorship, the power of attorney, the transfer of deed. Each document was a blade designed to sever me from my life's work. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It was not the police. It was the executioner in a beige cardigan. Her name was Ms. Gable, a notary public, who looked like she had seen too much and cared too little. She walked in clutching her official seal like a holy relic. Behind her trailed Dr. Miller, looking hungover but greedy, his eyes darting around the room as if calculating the resale value of my furniture. I slumped in my chair, my head lolling to the side. I let a little bit of drool gather at the corner of my mouth. It was humiliating. It was degrading, but it was necessary. I needed them to underestimate me. I needed them to believe the fortress was empty, so they would walk right into the trap. Tiffany greeted Ms. Gable with a somber face, acting the part of the heartbroken daughter. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "It has been such a hard morning. He is, well, you will see, he is barely here." She led the notary into the dining room. Ms. Gable looked at me. I stared past her, fixing my gaze on a spot on the wall. "The foreman," I mumbled loud enough for them to hear. "The foreman says the cement is too wet. We cannot pour. The bridge will collapse." Tiffany sighed, looking at the notary with pleading eyes. "See what I mean? He thinks he is on a construction site in 1970. Ms. Gable adjusted her glasses. She was strictly business. "Mr. King," she said loudly, leaning over the table, "do you know why I am here?" I blinked slowly. I looked at her beige cardigan. "Are you the lunch lady?" I asked. "I want the pudding. Ruby said I could have pudding." Miss Gable frowned. She looked at Dr. Miller. "Is he competent to sign legal documents, doctor?" Miller stepped forward, clearing his throat. He pulled out the fraudulent evaluation he had written the night before. "I have examined the patient, Ms. Gable. He is suffering from advanced vascular dementia with acute paranoia. He is not lucid. That is why we are filing for the emergency conservatorship. His son needs to take over immediately for his own safety." Ms. Gable nodded. She had heard enough. If a doctor said it was necessary, she would stamp the papers. She was just a rubber stamp in a corrupt machine. "All right," she said, opening her ledger. "Since he cannot understand the document, we will need a thumbprint, witnessed by 2 parties in addition to the signature if he can manage it. It is standard procedure for incapacitated signers. A thumbprint." My heart skipped a beat. A signature can be forged. A signature can be challenged as shaky or illegible. But a thumbprint is biological absolute proof that I was in the room, that I touched that paper. If I gave them my print, I was sealing my own fate. Unless the print itself was a message. I felt the weight of the UV marker in my pocket. It was a clear ink pen, usually used for marking security codes on expensive tools, or identifying stress points on blueprints that only show up under black light. I had slipped it into my palm earlier while pretending to fumble with my napkin. Tiffany placed the power of attorney document in front of me. "Okay, Dad," she said, her voice sticky sweet. "We are going to play a game. I need you to put your name right here. Then we can have the pudding." She forced a ballpoint pen into my hand. I gripped it like a toddler, making my fist rigid. I started to scribble. I made the pen dance off the line, tearing the paper slightly. "No," Tiffany hissed. "On the line, Desmond, on the line." "I cannot," I whined, dropping the pen. "My hand. The spiders are biting my hand." Tiffany looked at the notary, exasperated. "He cannot sign. Look at him." Ms. Gable sighed. "The thumbprint, then. Just get his print on the seal." Tiffany grabbed an ink pad from her bag. It was black permanent ink. She grabbed my right hand. Her nails dug into my wrist. She was not gentle. She was forceful. She was hurting me. "Open your hand," she ordered, trying to pry my fist open. "No," I shouted, pulling back. "No ink. Ink is dirty. Ruby will be mad." "Jamal, hold him down," Tiffany barked. Jamal stepped forward. He looked sick. He looked like a man walking to the gallows, but he did as he was told. He grabbed my shoulder, pinning me to the chair. "Just do it, Pop," he whispered. "Just let her take the print." I struggled. I flailed my arms. It looked like a tantrum, but it was a tactical maneuver. In the chaos of the struggle, I slipped my thumb into my palm where the UV marker was hidden. I uncapped it with one hand, a trick I had learned hanging off scaffolding 30 years ago. While Tiffany was yelling at Jamal to hold me tighter, I quickly wrote on the pad of my thumb. I did not write my name. I wrote 2 tiny letters, U-D, under duress. And then I scribbled a jagged line across the ridges of my fingerprint. The ink was clear. To the naked eye, my thumb looked clean, but chemically, I had just coated my skin in a substance that would alter the print and leave a glowing message for any forensic team that looked at the document later. "Got him," Tiffany yelled. She grabbed my wrist again. She forced my thumb down onto the black ink pad. She pressed hard, mashing my skin into the sponge. Then she dragged my hand over to the document. "Right here," she grunted. She slammed my thumb onto the paper. I cried out in fake pain. "You are hurting me. The foreman is hurting me." Tiffany lifted my hand. There on the white paper was a black smudge. It looked like a thumbprint, but I knew better. The UV ink I had applied would create a microscopic barrier. It would compromise the ridge detail, making the print legally contestable, and under a blue light, the letters UD would shine like a neon sign, screaming that this was an act of coercion, not consent. "Done," Tiffany announced triumphantly. Ms. Gable stamped the document. Ka-chunk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She stamped the deed transfer. Ka-chunk. She stamped the medical evaluation. Ka-chunk. It was over. In the eyes of the law, I was now a non-person. I was a ward of the state under the care of my son and his predator wife. Tiffany picked up the papers. She looked at them with a hunger that was terrifying to behold. She did not look at me. She did not look at Jamal. She looked at the paper as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you, Ms. Gable," she said, showing the notary to the door. "You have been a lifesaver." Dr. Miller followed them out, eager to get his check. I was left alone at the table with Jamal. He let go of my shoulder. He stepped back, rubbing his hands on his pants, as if trying to wipe off the guilt. "I am sorry, Pop," he whispered. I looked at him. I did not say anything. I just rubbed my thumb where the ink was drying. The black ink was on the surface, but the truth was underneath, invisible and waiting to be revealed. Tiffany came back into the room. She was practically skipping. "We did it," she squealed. "We actually did it." She walked over to the safe that was still locked. The safe she still could not open. But now she did not need the code. She turned to me. Her face changed. The sweet daughter-in-law mask dropped completely, revealing the monster underneath. "Get up," she said coldly. I looked at her, blinking. "Pudding?" I asked. "There is no pudding," she snapped. "Get up. You are sitting in my chair." She walked over and kicked the leg of my chair. I said, "Get up, old man. This is my house now, and I do not want you at the head of the table." Jamal looked shocked. "Tiff, stop. You do not have to be mean to him." She spun on him. "I will be whatever I want to be, Jamal. I just saved your life. I just saved us from your debt, so do not tell me how to treat the inventory." Inventory. That is what I was. I stood up slowly. I let my legs shake. I shuffled away from the table. "Where do I go?" I mumbled. "Go to your room," Tiffany said, pointing up the stairs. "And stay there. I have some phone calls to make. I need to call a locksmith to drill this safe, now that I have the court order. And then I need to call a realtor. We are selling this place as soon as the ink dries. Selling the house Ruby and I built." I started to walk toward the stairs. I passed Jamal. He would not meet my eyes. I climbed the stairs one by one. I sounded like a defeated old man, but inside, I was counting down. Step 1, get the papers signed. Check. Step 2, let them think they won. Check. Step 3, the celebration. They were going to call a locksmith. They were going to open the safe legally. They were going to throw a party. Perfect. I reached the landing. I did not go to my room. I went to the master bedroom closet, where the access panel to the attic was hidden. I was not going to sleep. I was going to the command center. I had the USB drive. I had the recorded video of the forgery. I had the coerced fingerprint. And now, I had the timeline. They thought they had won the war, but they had just signed their own confession. I pulled the attic ladder down silently. "Enjoy your victory lap, Tiffany," I thought, as I climbed into the darkness. Because the finish line is a cliff, and you are running full speed toward it. The bass from the stereo system downstairs vibrated through the floorboards of the master bedroom, acting like a rhythmic heartbeat of the invasion taking place in my home. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, listening to the sounds of corks popping and glass shattering against the marble countertops. It had been less than an hour since the notary left, and Tiffany had wasted no time in turning my sanctuary into a frat house for the morally bankrupt. She had locked my bedroom door from the outside. I heard the click of the deadbolt as she turned it, a sound that was meant to be the final period at the end of my sentence as a free man. To her, I was just inventory now, a piece of furniture that needed to be stored away while the adults conducted business. But she forgot that I installed that door. I framed that jam, and I knew that the locking mechanism was a simple privacy latch, not a prison-grade deadbolt. I could have kicked it open in 2 seconds, but that would have spoiled the surprise. Instead, I walked to the window. Below me, the patio was lit up with the string lights I had hung for Ruby's 60th birthday party. Through the French doors, I could see them. A dozen people had gathered. I recognized Kyle, the slimeball broker, holding court near the barbecue. There were others, too. Real estate flippers, hard money lenders, the kind of people who circle a dying animal waiting for the meat to soften. They were drinking my wine. Not just the table wine, but the vintage Bordeaux I had bought in France on our honeymoon. I watched Tiffany pour a glass of the 1982 Chateau Margaux into a red plastic cup. She spilled some on the limestone pavers and laughed. I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window. "Enjoy it," I whispered. "That bottle cost more than your soul." I watched Jamal standing in the corner. He was holding a beer, but he wasn't drinking. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. Every now and then, he would look up at my window. I stepped back into the shadows. I didn't want him to see me. I didn't want him to see the father he betrayed. I wanted him to remember me as the victim, until the very moment the handcuffs clicked. Tiffany climbed onto a garden chair, raising her red plastic cup high in the air. The music lowered slightly. "Attention, everyone," she shouted, her voice slurring slightly. "I just want to propose a toast to the new era of the King estate. The old regime has officially retired, and the new management is ready to liquidate." The crowd cheered. Kyle raised his bottle. "To the new owners," he bellowed, "and to the commission." "To the commission," they echoed. I felt a bile rise in my throat. They were toasting to my demise in my own backyard. It was time to go. I turned to the window latch. It was a heavy brass fitting. Usually I kept it locked tight for security, but when I tried to turn it, I found it was already unlatched. I smiled in the darkness. Rosa, my housekeeper, had not said a word to me all evening. She had moved through the house like a shadow, serving drinks, cleaning up messes, keeping her head down. Tiffany thought Rosa was just another piece of furniture. But Rosa was family. She knew the plan. She knew I needed a way out that didn't involve the front door. I slid the window up. It moved silently on well-oiled tracks. The humid night air hit my face, carrying the smell of charcoal and expensive perfume. I looked down. It was a 15-foot drop to the hydrangeas below. For a normal 73-year-old man, this would be a death sentence, a broken hip waiting to happen. But I was not normal, and I was not frail. I climbed out onto the ledge. I gripped the sturdy trellis that ran up the side of the house. I had built this trellis myself 20 years ago, welding the iron bars and anchoring them deep into the brickwork. I knew it could hold 500 pounds of load. I tested my weight on the first bar. My shoulder protested a sharp ache of arthritis, but I ignored it. Pain is just information. The structure held. I began to descend, hand over hand, foot over foot. I moved with the muscle memory of a man who had spent his youth climbing scaffolding and steel beams. My breathing was controlled. I kept my body close to the wall, blending into the ivy that covered the iron. Below me, the party raged on. "So when do we list it?" Kyle asked, his voice drifting up to me. "First thing Monday," Tiffany replied. "I want a cash offer, no contingencies. We need to pay off Jamal's little problem, and then book a flight to the Maldives." "And the old man?" Kyle asked. Tiffany laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound. "He goes to Shady Acres nursing home on Tuesday. I already bribed the administrator to take him without a wait list. It is a dump, but who cares? He won't know the difference. He thinks he is waiting for pudding." I paused on the trellis. My knuckles turned white, gripping the iron. Shady Acres, the state-run facility that had been investigated 3 times for patient neglect. That was where she planned to discard me. "I will see you in hell first, Tiffany," I thought. I reached the bottom. I dropped the last 2 feet, landing softly in the mulch of the flower bed. I crouched low, hidden by the bushes. I was 10 feet away from them. I could see the sweat on Jamal's forehead. I could see the greed in Tiffany's eyes. I waited for the laughter to swell again, and then I moved. I stayed in the shadows of the hedges, moving along the perimeter of the property. I did not run. Running attracts attention. I moved with purposeful stealth, a ghost leaving the graveyard. I reached the side gate. It was locked. I reached over and flipped the latch. I slipped out onto the street. The silence of the neighborhood was jarring after the noise of the party. The crickets were chirping. The street lights cast long orange pools on the asphalt. I straightened my shirt. I smoothed my hair. I was no longer the confused old man. I was Desmond King, and I was on a mission. I walked down the street, away from my house, away from the life I had built. I walked toward the corner where a large black SUV was parked under the canopy of a weeping willow. The engine was idling quietly. The windows were tinted dark. As I approached, the rear window rolled down. A face appeared. It was a face lined with age and wisdom, wreathed in cigar smoke. Saul Cohen. He looked at me. He looked at my grease-stained clothes, my wild hair, my dusty shoes. "You look like hell, Desmond," he grunted. "I feel like it," I replied, leaning against the car door. "But I am standing." Saul nodded. He unlocked the door. "Get in. The cavalry is here." I slid into the back seat. The air conditioning was cold and crisp. Sitting next to Saul was a man in a windbreaker with the letters FBI stenciled on the back in yellow. "Desmond, this is Agent Miller," Saul said. "No relation to the fake doctor, I assume." Agent Miller extended a hand. "Mr. King, we have been monitoring the feed from your lawyer's cloud server. We have the video of the forgery. We have the audio of the conspiracy. And thanks to the USB drive you uploaded, we have the trail of the money laundering operation. Is it enough? I asked. My voice sounded hoarse. Agent Miller smiled grimly. It is more than enough. We have them on RICO charges, elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and for your son, money laundering for a cartel. We are talking 20 years minimum. 20 years. I looked out the window back toward my house. I could see the glow of the party lights over the fence. I could hear the faint thump of the music. They were celebrating. They were toasting to their future. They had no idea that their future had just been canceled. Are you ready, Mr. King? Agent Miller asked. We have units stationed at both ends of the street. We were just waiting for you to be clear of the blast zone. I thought about Jamal. I thought about the red bicycle. I thought about the soup he had eaten tonight, the soup that was meant to poison me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the UV marker. I turned it over in my fingers. I gave him a chance, I whispered. I asked him if he wanted out. He chose the money. Saul put a hand on my shoulder. You cannot save people who do not want to be saved, Des. You built the bridge. He chose to jump off it. I took a deep breath. I felt the steel in my spine stiffen. Let's go, I said. I want to look them in the eye when the tower falls. Agent Miller grabbed his radio. All units, this is Alpha 1. The asset is secure. I repeat, the asset is secure. Move in. Execute the warrant. Suddenly the street exploded with light. Headlights flicked on from parked cars all down the block. Blue and red lights began to flash, silently spinning in the darkness. Doors opened, and uniformed officers poured out, moving with tactical precision. I watched as they surrounded my house. The music from the party was still playing. It was a pop song about living forever. The irony was not lost on me. Saul's driver put the SUV in gear, and we rolled slowly toward the driveway behind the wall of police cars. I watched the house getting closer. The party was about to end, and the reckoning was about to begin. The street outside my home looked like a landing strip for an alien invasion. The silent strobe of blue and red lights bounced off the manicured lawns and the white columns of the neighborhood, creating a strobe effect that turned the peaceful night into a war zone. I sat in the back of the black SUV, next to Saul Cohen and Agent Miller, watching the scene unfold with the cold detachment of a general watching a distant airstrike. Inside the gates of my estate, the party was still in full swing. I could see the silhouette of Tiffany dancing near the pool, holding a bottle of my vintage wine like a trophy. She was laughing. She was celebrating the conquest of a kingdom that had already crumbled beneath her feet. Agent Miller picked up his radio. Execute, he said calmly. The order was simple, but the result was chaotic perfection. From the shadows of the hedges and the parked cars, 24 tactical officers emerged. They did not knock. They did not ring the doorbell. They swarmed. I watched as they breached the iron gates I had designed to keep intruders out. Tonight, those gates swung open to let justice in. The officers moved in a phalanx, a wave of black uniforms and yellow letters spelling FBI. Move, 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 a voice bellowed over a megaphone. Federal agents, everybody down. The music inside the property cut off abruptly. I saw the party guests freeze. The real estate flippers, the hard money lenders, the parasites Kyle had invited, they all stopped mid-sip. Then the panic set in. People started running. I saw a man in a linen suit try to dive into the bushes, only to be tackled by an agent. I saw 2 women in cocktail dresses drop their drinks and scream, huddled together by the barbecue grill. But my eyes were fixed on the patio, on the 3 people who mattered. Tiffany dropped the wine bottle. It shattered on the pavers, a dark red stain spreading across the limestone like blood. She did not run. She stood there, paralyzed by confusion and outrage. Jamal was standing next to her. He looked terrified. He raised his hands in the air, immediately, a reflex born of guilt and fear. And Kyle, the slippery broker, he tried to make a run for the side gate, the same gate I had just exited. But 2 officers were already there waiting for him. They slammed him against the brick wall, cuffing his hands behind his back before he could even utter a protest. Let's go, Saul said, opening the car door. It is time for the closing arguments. I stepped out of the SUV. My legs felt heavy, not from age, but from the gravity of what I was doing. I was walking toward the destruction of my own family, But as I looked at the flashing lights, I reminded myself that I did not start this fire. I was just the one holding the hose. We walked up the driveway, flanked by agents. The air smelled of charcoal smoke and fear. We reached the patio. The scene was a tableau of humiliation. The guests were being corralled into the living room for questioning. Kyle was being dragged away, kicking and screaming about his rights. But Tiffany and Jamal were still standing by the pool, surrounded by 4 agents. Tiffany saw me first. Her eyes went wide. She looked at my dirty clothes, my wild hair, the grease on my face. For a second, she looked confused. She thought I was locked in my room. She thought I was asleep. Then she looked at the agents. And then she looked at Saul Cohen walking beside me. "What is this?" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Who are you people? You cannot do this. This is private property." Agent Miller stepped forward. "Tiffany King, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and possession of controlled substances. Jamal King, you are under arrest for money laundering, racketeering, and grand larceny." "Money laundering?" Jamal squeaked. His face was the color of ash. Tiffany stepped in front of him, shielding him, not out of love, but out of a desperate need to maintain control. "You have made a mistake," she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the agent. "This is my house. I am the legal guardian of this estate. I have the papers." She frantically gestured to the house. "The papers are on the dining room table," she shrieked. "A court order. I have power of attorney. That man standing there is mentally incompetent. He has dementia. He does not know what is going on. Anything he told you is a lie." She turned to me, her eyes blazing with hatred. "Tell them, Desmond," she hissed. "Tell them about the foreman. Tell them about the spiders. Act crazy, old man, or so help me God." I looked at her. I did not twitch. I did not shake. I did not mumble about pudding. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I wiped the grease from my forehead. I smoothed my hair back. I buttoned my shirt. The transformation was subtle but immediate. The senile invalid vanished. The structural engineer stood tall. "I am not acting anymore, Tiffany," I said. My voice was low, steady, and cold as steel. "And there are no spiders, just snakes." Tiffany gasped. She took a step back as if I had slapped her. "You," she stammered, "you were faking." I walked closer to her. "I heard you, Tiffany. I heard every word. I saw the camera feed. I saw you break the urn. I saw you drug the soup. And I saw you force my hand onto that paper." Tiffany's face twisted. She looked at the agents, then back at me. "It does not matter," she screamed, desperate now. "It does not matter if you were faking. I have the thumbprint. I have the notary seal. The law says I am your guardian. The law says I control your assets. This house is mine to sell and you cannot stop me." She looked at Saul Cohen, who was standing quietly holding a briefcase. "And who is this?" she demanded. "Your other senile friend." Saul smiled. It was a shark smile. "I am Saul Cohen," he said, stepping into the light. "I am Mr. King's attorney, and I am afraid you have a fundamental misunderstanding of property law, Mrs. King." Tiffany crossed her arms. "I know the law. I have a conservatorship over Desmond King. That gives me control over everything he owns." "That is correct," Saul said calmly. "It gives you control over everything Desmond King owns personally." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. "But Desmond King does not own this house." Tiffany blinked. "What?" Saul opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in blue leather. "Desmond King does not own the cars. He does not own the stock portfolio. He does not own the land deeds you were trying to sell." "Then who does?" Tiffany screamed. "He is the only name on the mailbox." Saul held up the document. "The Ruby King Irrevocable Trust," he announced. "Established 5 years ago upon the death of Mrs. Ruby King. All assets were transferred into the trust to be managed for the benefit of future generations. Desmond King is merely the trustee with a life estate interest. He has the right to live here. He does not have the right to sell. And neither does his guardian." Tiffany froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Saul continued driving the final nail into the coffin. "And the trust has a very specific clause, the bridge clause protocol. In the event that a beneficiary such as your husband Jamal attempts to harm the trustee or commits a felony involving the estate, the trust is automatically locked. All assets are frozen. All access is revoked, and the beneficiary is disinherited." "Disinherited?" Jamal whispered. He looked at me. "Dad, the money, the 500 grand. "It is gone, son," I said. "It is all gone. The trust is locked. You cannot sell the house. You cannot sell the watches. You cannot even sell the spoons. You are broke." Tiffany looked at Jamal. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The money laundering debt, the loan sharks, the plan to flee to Paris. It all hinged on selling my assets. "You lied to me," she whispered to Jamal. "You said it was his money." "I thought it was," Jamal cried. Agent Miller stepped in. "That is enough. Cuff them." The agents moved in. They grabbed Tiffany's arms, pulling them behind her back. "No," she screamed, kicking and thrashing. "Get off me, I am Tiffany King. I am a victim here. He tricked me. The old man tricked me." They snapped the handcuffs on her wrists. The sound was a sharp metallic click that signaled the end of her reign. Jamal did not fight. He let them cuff him. He hung his head, looking at the ground. Agent Miller looked at me. "We also found the laptop, Mr. King, the one with the ledgers. Your son was washing money for the cartel. That is a federal crime. He is looking at 20 years. I looked at Jamal. My son. The boy in the red bicycle helmet. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. "Pop, help me," he begged. "Please, tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I did not know." I looked at him. I felt a crack in my heart, a fissure that would never heal. But I remembered the USB drive. I remembered the choice he made when he thought I was helpless. I walked up to him. I stood inches from his face. "I offered you a hand, Jamal," I said softly. "This morning at the table, I asked you if you were in trouble. I asked you to be honest. I was scared." Pop Jamal sobbed. Tiffany said, "I cut him off. You are a grown man, Jamal. You do not get to blame the woman you married for the crimes you committed. You chose the shortcut. You chose the easy money. And you chose to betray the man who taught you how to walk." I stepped back. "I cannot help you, son. The bridge has collapsed. You have to swim on your own now." "Take them away," Agent Miller ordered. The agents began to march them toward the patrol cars. Tiffany was still screaming, cursing my name, cursing Jamal, cursing the world. Jamal was weeping silently, his shoulders shaking. I watched them go. I watched them being shoved into the back of separate cars. The doors slammed shut. The flashing lights painted their faces in blue and red. Saul stood beside me. "Are you okay, Des?" he asked. I took a deep breath, inhaling the night air. It was still humid, but the smell of Tiffany's perfume was fading, replaced by the clean scent of rain coming in the distance. "I am standing, Saul," I said. "I am standing." The police cars began to pull away one by one, forming a convoy of justice leaving my driveway. I looked back at the house. The front door was open. The lights were on. The party was over. The house was empty. It was just a building now. Bricks and mortar. The family that lived inside it was gone. But as I looked at the trellis I had climbed down, the iron bars that had held my weight, I realized something. I was still here. The foundation was still here. I turned to Saul. "Do you think the police will mind if I go inside and finish that bottle of Chateau Margaux?" I asked. Saul chuckled, handing me a cigar from his pocket. "I think you earned it, Des. I think you earned the whole bottle." We walked back toward the house. The war was over. The silence returned. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt safe. It felt like mine again. The rotating blue lights of the police cruisers swept across the front of my house, creating a strobe effect that made the scene look like a slow-motion nightmare. Tiffany was still screaming about her rights, her voice shrill and desperate, piercing the humid night air. Jamal stood beside her, his head hanging low, the fight completely drained from him. They were handcuffed, standing on the driveway where just this morning I had loaded their luggage for a trip to Paris that never existed. I stood next to Saul Cohen, my old friend and lawyer, watching them unravel. Saul held a thick blue leather binder in his hands. It looked like an ordinary folder, but inside it contained the ghost of my wife, Ruby, and the ironclad will she had left behind. Tiffany saw us standing there. She stopped screaming at the officer and turned her venom toward me. "You cannot do this," she hissed, struggling against the plastic zip ties cutting into her wrists. "I have the papers. I have the court order. I am the legal guardian of this estate. This is kidnapping. This is false arrest." Agent Miller stepped forward, his face impassive. He looked at Tiffany with the boredom of a man who had heard every excuse in the book. "Mrs. King," he said calmly, "we are not arresting you for guardianship. We are arresting you for federal wire fraud and attempted grand larceny of a charitable trust." Tiffany froze. "A charitable trust," she repeated, blinking rapidly. "What are you talking about?" Saul stepped into the light. He adjusted his glasses and opened the blue binder. He did not look at Tiffany with anger. He looked at her with pity. "You made a fatal miscalculation, Mrs. King," Saul said, his voice gravelly and deep. "You assumed that because Desmond lives in this house, he owns this house. You assumed that because his name is on the mailbox, he holds the deed." "He does own it," Tiffany spat. "He built it." "He built it, yes," Saul corrected, "but he does not own it, not anymore." Saul turned the page of the document. The paper crinkled loudly in the silence. 5 years ago, shortly before she passed away, Mrs. Ruby King reorganized the family assets. She was a brilliant woman. She saw the direction her son was heading. She saw the gambling. She saw the reckless spending. And quite frankly, she saw you, Tiffany. Tiffany went pale. She stopped struggling. Ruby created the Ruby King Charitable Trust. Saul continued reading from the text. Upon her death, every single asset, including this house, the land downtown, the stock portfolio, and the vintage car collection, was transferred into the trust. The beneficiary of the trust is not Jamal. It is the Atlanta Children's Hospital and the Engineering Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Youth. I watched Jamal's head snap up. His eyes were wide with shock. "Mom did what?" he whispered. "She gave it away. She gave it all away." "Not all of it," Saul said, closing the binder. "She left a life estate clause for your father. Desmond has the right to live in this property and use the assets for his maintenance until his death. He is the trustee. He manages the wealth, but he cannot sell it. He cannot transfer it. And most importantly, he cannot be forced to sign it over to anyone else because it was never his to give." I stepped forward then. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see the man they thought was a senile fool. "You were trying to rob an empty vault," I said softly. "Even if I had signed those papers willingly, Tiffany, even if I had given you the code to the safe, you would have walked away with nothing. Because the moment you tried to sell the deeds, the title company would have flagged it. The moment you tried to liquidate the stocks, the bank would have frozen the transaction. You were fighting for a crown that does not exist." Tiffany looked as if she had been punched in the stomach. She sagged against the police car, her knees buckling. "No," she whispered. "That is a lie. You are lying. We checked the records. The public records say King. The public records list the trustee," Saul explained patiently. "But the underlying ownership is the charity. And here is the best part." Saul tapped the cover of the binder. "The trust has a specific protection clause. It is called the bad actor provision. If any family member attempts to defraud the trustee or harm the estate, they are automatically disinherited from any small stipends they might have received." Jamal let out a low moan, a sound of pure despair. "Stipends?" he asked, his voice trembling. "There were stipends." "Yes," Saul said. "The trust was set up to pay you $5,000 a month for life, starting next year, when you turned 33, provided you stayed clean, provided you stayed out of trouble. Your mother wanted to ensure you always had a safety net, Jamal. She loved you. She wanted to protect you from poverty." I saw the realization hit Jamal. He had traded a guaranteed lifetime income for a gamble that had just destroyed his life. He had traded his mother's love for a quick payout to a loan shark. $5,000 a month. Jamal cried, tears streaming down his face. I threw it away. I threw it all away. Tiffany, however, was not thinking about the lost money. She was thinking about the handcuffs. Her mind was still racing, trying to find a loophole, trying to find an escape. "Okay," she said, breathing hard. "Okay, so we cannot sell the house. Fine. We made a mistake. It is a civil matter. It is a misunderstanding. You cannot arrest us for a misunderstanding. Uncuff me, and we will leave. We will walk away right now. We will go to Paris, and you will never see us again." Agent Miller laughed. It was a dry, sharp bark of a laugh. "A misunderstanding," he repeated. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and held it up for Tiffany to see. This is the footage from the camera inside the house, Mrs. King. This is you forcing Mr. King's thumb onto a document. This is you discussing the forgery of medical records with Dr. Miller. Tiffany stared at the screen. She saw herself. She saw the violence in her own actions. And this Agent Miller continued swiping the screen as the data we recovered from your husband's laptop. The invoices for King Logistics. The wire transfers to known cartel associates. That was Jamal, Tiffany screamed. That was him. I did not know about the laundering. I just wanted the house. You are married, Agent Miller said. You are partners in the LLC. Your signature is on the bank accounts. You are not just a wife, Mrs. King. You are a co-conspirator. Tiffany looked at Jamal. The look in her eyes was pure murder. She lunged at him, straining against the officer holding her. You ruined me, she shrieked. You dragged me into this. You said it was easy money. You said your father was stupid. You said nobody would catch us. Jamal did not fight back. He just stood there, crying silently, letting her scream. That is enough, Agent Miller ordered. Put them in the car. The officers grabbed them. They began to shove them into the back of the cruisers. Wait, Jamal shouted. He planted his feet, trying to stop. Wait, Dad. I stood there, my hands in my pockets. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me feeling old and tired. Dad, please, Jamal begged. His face pressed against the glass of the window as they pushed him in. I am sorry. I did not know. Mom really did that. She really gave it to charity. I walked up to the car. The window was down just a crack. She did it to save you, Jamal, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She knew that if you had access to millions, you would kill yourself or end up in prison. She tried to force you to work. She tried to force you to be a man. I paused, looking at his tear-stained face. The face that used to look up at me with hero worship when I came home from the construction site. She failed, I whispered. And so did I. But Dad, Jamal cried. What happens to me now? The loan sharks. If I go to prison, they will find me. They will kill me inside. I looked at Agent Miller. He will be in federal protective custody, Agent Miller said. He is a witness against the cartel now. He will be safe from the loan sharks. But he will be in a cell for a very long time. I nodded. You are safe now, son, I said, turning away. You are in the safest place you could possibly be. A place where you cannot hurt anyone, and nobody can hurt you, just like a child in a crib. Desmond. Tiffany screamed from the other car. Desmond, you have to help us. We are family. You cannot let them take us. I looked at the house. My house. The house Ruby and I built. It stood tall and proud against the night sky. The foundation was solid. The roof was sound. It had survived the storm. I looked back at Tiffany. Family, I repeated. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cheap plastic green soldier I had picked up from the floor earlier, the one Jamal had discarded. This is family, I said, holding up the toy. This is memory. This is loyalty. You two are just strangers who broke into my home. I signaled to the officers. Take them. The doors slammed shut. The engines revved. The convoy began to move. I watched the red taillights fade down the street. I watched my son disappear into the system. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Saul. You did the right thing, Des, he said softly. I know, I said, but knowing it did not make it hurt any less. I looked at the blue binder in Saul's hand. The trust, the charity, Ruby's legacy. She was smarter than both of us, Saul, I said. She knew this day would come. Saul nodded. She was a hell of a woman, Desmond. I turned back to the house. Rosa was standing in the doorway. She had cleaned up the broken wine bottle. She had turned on the porch light. Come on, Saul, I said. I think there is still half a bottle of marrow left in the cellar, and I think I have a lot of paperwork to do for the children's hospital. We walked up the steps. The nightmare was over. The house was quiet, and for the first time in years, I felt like the owner again, not of the money, but of my own life. The humidity of the Georgia night felt heavy on my skin, but it was nothing compared to the weight in my chest as I watched the empire of lies crumble on my driveway. The flashing blue and red lights from the police cruisers cut through the darkness, creating a strobe effect that turned the faces of my family into grotesque masks of fear and desperation. The party music had long since died, replacing the thumping bass with the crackle of police radios and the metallic jingle of handcuffs. I stood on the porch steps next to Saul Cohen. I felt old, not the fake senile old that I had portrayed for the last 24 hours, but a deep, ancient weariness that settled into my bones. A father is supposed to protect his children from the world. But what does a father do when the world needs to be protected from his children? Jamal was being led toward the patrol car by 2 federal agents. He was walking with his head down, his shoulders hunched, as if he were trying to shrink inside his own body. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to hide in the closet during thunderstorms, waiting for me to come and tell him the thunder could not hurt him. But this was a storm I could not stop. This was a hurricane of his own making. As they reached the car, Jamal looked up. He saw me standing there. He stopped. He planted his feet on the asphalt, refusing to move. "Dad!" he screamed. The word ripped out of his throat, raw and terrified. "Dad, please!" The agents tugged at his arms, but he fought them, not with strength, but with the frantic energy of a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. "Dad, tell them," he cried, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat of his panic. "Tell them I did not know. Tell them it was all Tiffany. She made me do it, Dad. She said it was the only way." I walked down the steps. Saul tried to grab my arm to stop me, but I shook him off. I needed to do this. I needed to look him in the eye one last time. I walked until I was just a few feet away from him. The agents paused, sensing the gravity of the moment. They let him stand there, cuffed and broken. "I was seduced, Dad." Jamal sobbed, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "She told me you were sick. She told me the money was just sitting there. I did not want to hurt you. I swear. I just wanted to fix the debt. Please, Dad. You know me. You know I am not a criminal. Call the lawyer off. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised. I looked at the man who shared my name, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. Like looking at a blueprint and seeing exactly where the load-bearing wall had failed. I took a step closer. I did not hunch my back. I did not tremble. I stood tall, my spine straight, my eyes clear and sharp. I dropped the act completely. "Jamal?" I said, my voice steady and low, vibrating with the steel of a man who has built bridges over raging rivers. "Look at me." He looked up. He saw the change. He saw the fog clear from my eyes. He saw the father he thought was gone. "You are not sick," he whispered, realizing the truth. "No, son," I said. "I am not sick. I was never sick. I was testing the foundation, and you failed." I pointed back at the house. "This morning, at the breakfast table, I gave you a chance. I sat there, and I asked you if you were happy. I asked you if you needed help. I offered you a way out, Jamal. I begged you to tell me the truth." Jamal flinched as if I had struck him. "But you did not choose the truth." I continued, my voice rising slightly, cutting through the noise of the sirens. "You chose the signature. You chose to declare me insane. You chose to steal my life so you could pay for your mistakes." "But I was scared," Jamal cried. "We are all scared," I snapped. "Being a man means doing the right thing, even when you were scared. You are 32 years old, Jamal. You are not a child who got lost. You are a man who brought wolves into the sheep pen because you were too weak to close the gate." I signaled to the agents. "Put him in the car." "No, Dad, wait," Jamal screamed, struggling again. "Do not leave me. Do not let them take me." I turned my back on him. "You left me a long time ago, son," I said softly. "You left me the moment you looked at me and saw a dollar sign instead of a father." They shoved him into the back seat. I heard the door slam shut. It was a heavy, final sound, like the door of a vault closing forever. I did not look back. I could not. If I looked back, I might break, and tonight I had to be unbreakable. I turned my attention to the other drama unfolding near the gate. Tiffany was putting up much more of a fight. She was kicking at the shins of the officer trying to search her. She was screaming threats, invoking names of lawyers she could not afford, and politicians who did not know she existed. "Get your hands off my bag," she shrieked, as an officer wrestled her designer purse away from her. "That is private property. You have no warrant for that." "Actually, Mrs. King," Agent Miller said, stepping forward, "we have a warrant for everything. Person, property, and premises." He opened the bag. He dumped the contents onto the hood of the police car. Lipstick, credit cards, a phone, and a bright orange prescription bottle. Agent Miller picked up the bottle. He rattled it. He read the label. Lorazepam, he read aloud. Prescribed to nobody. The label has been scratched off. He opened the bottle and poured a few pills into his gloved hand. Tiffany went silent. Her screaming stopped instantly, replaced by a look of pure terror. "These look like the same pills we found traces of in the kitchen sink," Agent Miller said, looking at her. "The pills you used to spike the soup." "I did not spike anything," Tiffany stammered, her eyes darting around wildly. "Those are for my anxiety. I have anxiety." Agent Miller shined his flashlight into the bag again. He pulled out a second bottle, and a third. Oxycodone, Adderall, and something that looks like liquid fentanyl. He whistled low. "You are a walking pharmacy, Mrs. King. This is not just possession. This is intent to distribute, or in your case, intent to incapacitate a vulnerable adult." He looked at me standing a few feet away. "Mr. King, did you consent to be medicated by this woman?" I walked over to the hood of the car. I looked at the pills, the little blue soldiers she had sent to conquer my mind. "No," I said, cold and flat. "I did not consent. She tried to poison me, Agent Miller. She and my son watched me eat soup they believed was laced with these drugs. They wanted me comatose so they could rob my safe." Tiffany lunged at me. She actually tried to bite me, but the officer held her back. "You old devil," she hissed, her face twisted into a mask of ugliness. "You switched the bowls. I saw you. You switched them. You drugged Jamal." I smiled. It was a cold, humorless smile. "I am a senile old man, Tiffany," I said, mocking her own words from earlier. "I do not know what bowls are. I just wanted the pudding." "You set me up," she screamed. "This is entrapment." "No, Tiffany," I said, leaning in close so only she could hear. "This is consequence. You thought you were the smartest person in the room. You thought you could walk into my house, disrespect my wife's memory, and treat me like garbage. You forgot one thing." I pointed to the house standing solid and imposing in the background. "I built this. I know every exit. I know every weakness. And I know how to trap a rat." She stared at me, breathing hard, her chest heaving. "I hope you rot," she whispered. "I hope you enjoy the cafeteria food," I replied. "I hear it is terrible, but at least it won't be poisoned." Agent Miller nodded to his men. "Add possession of a Schedule I controlled substance to the charge sheet, and attempted assault. Get her out of here." They dragged her away. She did not go quietly. She cursed my name until the window rolled up, cutting off her voice. I watched her car join the line. Finally, I looked toward the side gate. Kyle, the broker, was already in the back of a squad car. He was not screaming. He was not crying. He was staring straight ahead, his face pale. He knew the game was over. He knew that the people Jamal owed money to the cartel were going to be very unhappy that their laundry machine had been broken. He was safer in prison than he was on the street. Saul Cohen walked up to me, handing me a cigar. He didn't light it. He just handed it to me as a prop, something to hold on to. "It is done, Des," he said. "The trust is locked. The assets are safe. The bad actors are removed." I looked at the convoy of police cars as they began to roll down the driveway one by one. The red taillights looked like a funeral procession, and in a way, it was. It was the funeral of my family. I looked at the empty driveway. The silence rushed back in, filling the space where the sirens had been. "I am the only one left, Saul," I said, my voice quiet. "I won. I saved the estate. I saved the legacy, but the house is empty." Saul put a hand on my shoulder. "The house is empty tonight," he said, "but the foundation is still there. You can fill it with new things, Desmond. Better things. Things that don't try to tear you down." I nodded slowly. I looked up at the night sky. The clouds were clearing, revealing a sliver of moon. I turned back to the house. The front door was open. The lights were warm and inviting. Rosa was standing there. She had made a pot of coffee. I could smell it from here. "I am tired, Saul," I said. "I think I am going to go inside. I think I am going to sit in my chair, the one at the head of the table, and I am going to drink a cup of coffee in peace." "You do that," Saul said, patting my back. "You earned it." I walked up the steps. My legs felt lighter now. The burden was gone. I walked into my home. I closed the door. I locked it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. The silence on my front porch used to feel lonely. For 5 years after Ruby passed, I would sit here in my rocking chair, watching the sun go down, and the silence would wrap around me like a cold blanket. But this morning, the silence feels different. It feels clean. It feels like the air after a violent thunderstorm, when the ozone smells fresh and the world has been washed of all the dust and grime. It has been 30 days since the night the blue lights flashed in my driveway. 30 days since the FBI took my son and his wife away in handcuffs. The scandal was the talk of the town for a week. The neighbors whispered when they walked their dogs. The country club members stared when I went for lunch. But I did not hide. I did not hang my head. I walked with my back straight and my head high, because I had nothing to be ashamed of. I had cleaned my house, and a man who has taken out the trash does not apologize for the empty bin. I sat on the porch swing, a cup of Earl Grey tea steaming in my hand. The morning sun was filtering through the oak trees, dappling the wooden planks with light. It was a Tuesday. Usually Tuesdays were hard. Tuesdays were the days I used to wait for Jamal to call. I used to sit by the phone, hoping for 5 minutes of his time, hoping to hear about his life. The phone does not ring on Tuesdays anymore. Jamal is currently in a federal detention center awaiting trial. The lawyers tell me he is looking at 15 to 20 years. He calls me sometimes from the prison phone collect. I see the number on the caller ID. Federal Bureau of Prisons. I do not answer. It is not out of cruelty. It is out of necessity. I realized that every time I answered, I was giving him a piece of my peace, and I have worked too hard to get it back to give it away to a ghost. Rosa stepped out onto the porch. She was carrying a silver tray with a plate of biscuits. She looked younger too these last few weeks. The stress of walking on eggshells around Tiffany had aged her, but now that the predator was gone, Rosa was smiling again. "More tea, Mr. King?" she asked, setting the tray down. "Thank you, Rosa," I said, taking a biscuit. "And please stop calling me Mr. King. We survived the war together. I think you can call me Desmond." She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Old habits are hard to break, Desmond, but I will try. Are you ready for this afternoon?" I looked at my watch. The Patek Philippe that Tiffany had tried to sell was back on my wrist, ticking steadily. "I think so," I said. Is she nice?" Rosa laughed. "Dr. Evans is not just nice, she is brilliant. She taught history at Emory University for 40 years. She likes jazz, she likes old houses, and she hates people who are late, so you better get moving." I nodded, taking a sip of tea. "I will go get changed in a minute, but first I have one last piece of business to attend to." Rosa looked at me. She knew me well enough to know when I was working on a structural problem. She nodded and went back inside, leaving me alone with the morning light. I reached into the inside pocket of my cardigan. My fingers brushed against the worn edges of an envelope. It was not a white envelope. It was yellowed with age, brittle to the touch. It had been sealed for 32 years. I pulled it out. I held it in the sunlight. It looked harmless, just a piece of paper. But inside this envelope was the heaviest secret of my life. I tore the top open. The sound was sharp in the quiet air. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. It was a laboratory report from 1985, a paternity test. I did not need to read it. I had memorized the result 3 decades ago. Probability of paternity, 0%. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. I remembered the day Ruby told me she was pregnant. We had been trying for years with no luck. The doctors said it was unlikely. And then suddenly, a miracle, or so I thought. But I knew the dates. I knew that during the month of conception, I had been in Saudi Arabia overseeing a bridge project. I knew it was impossible. But I also knew that Ruby had been lonely. I knew she had a brief moment of weakness with an old flame while I was gone. I could have left her. I could have thrown her out. My pride demanded it. My ego screamed for it. But then I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, and I saw the love. I knew that one mistake did not define a marriage, and I knew that the child growing inside her was innocent. So I made a choice, the hardest choice of my life. I burned the first copy of the test. I never told her I knew. I held her hand in the delivery room. I cut the cord. I named him Jamal. I gave him my name. I gave him my history. I gave him my heart. I raised him as my own flesh and blood. I stayed up with him when he had fevers. I taught him to throw a baseball. I paid for his college. I built a legacy for him. And I never once treated him differently. I never once let him feel that he was anything less than my son. I looked at the paper in my hand. Jamal had betrayed me. He had drugged me. He had tried to steal everything I owned. And his justification, his twisted logic, was that he deserved it, that it was his birthright, that because his blood ran through my veins, he was entitled to my sweat. I chuckled softly, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, son," I whispered to the paper, "if only you knew. You betrayed the only man on earth who loved you, not because he had to, but because he chose to. You betrayed the man who saved you from being a mistake and turned you into a miracle." I pulled a silver lighter from my pocket. It was the lighter I used to light my cigars on the job site. I flicked the wheel. The flame danced in the gentle breeze. I held the corner of the paper to the fire. I watched the edge turn brown, then black. The fire caught. It ate the words. It ate the statistics. It ate the science that proved Jamal was a stranger. I dropped the burning paper into the empty saucer on the tray. I watched it curl and twist. I watched the name Jamal King turn into ash. This was my final act of fatherhood. I would keep his secret. I would not use this to hurt him. I would not go to the prison and wave this in his face to show him he was a fraud. That would be petty. That would be beneath me. Let him believe he is my son. Let him believe he betrayed his own blood. That guilt is his punishment. My silence is my victory. I watched the last ember die out. A small pile of gray ash was all that remained of the lie I had lived for 32 years. The wind picked up and blew the ash away, scattering it into the garden, where the hydrangeas were blooming blue and vibrant. It was done. The debt was paid. The contract was fulfilled. I stood up. My knees felt strong. My back felt straight. I walked back into the house. The air inside was cool and smelled of lemon polish. The ghost of the party, the ghost of the betrayal, it was all gone. I went to my room and opened the closet. I pushed aside the gray cardigans and the comfortable slacks. I reached for the suit bag in the back. I pulled out a cream-colored linen suit. I had bought it 5 years ago for a cruise Ruby and I never got to take. It still had the tags on it. I put it on. It fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me did not look 73. He looked distinguished. He looked wise. He looked like a man who had walked through the fire and come out made of gold. I put on my favorite pair of aviator sunglasses. "You still got it, Desmond," I said to the mirror. "You still got it." I walked downstairs. Rosa was waiting by the door, holding my car keys. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Well, look at you," she said, smiling. "Dr. Evans is not going to know what hit her." I took the keys. "Thank you, Rosa, for everything. Go," she said, shooing me out the door. "Do not be late, and do not talk about structural engineering all night. Ask her about history." I stepped out onto the driveway. My vintage Cadillac was parked there, shining in the sun. I had spent the last week restoring it, buffing out the scratches, fixing the engine. It purred like a kitten when I turned the key. I rolled down the windows. I backed out of the driveway. I looked at the house one last time. It was a beautiful house. It was a strong house. It would stand for another 100 years. But it was just a house. My life was out here on the road. I shifted into drive. I turned on the radio. A jazz trumpet blasted through the speakers, bright and hopeful. I tapped the steering wheel in time with the music. I was 73 years old. I had lost a wife. I had lost a son. I had almost lost my mind. But as I drove down the tree-lined street, feeling the wind on my face, I realized something. I was free, and the road ahead was wide open. I pressed the gas pedal and drove toward the city, toward the coffee shop, toward Dr. Evans, toward the rest of my life. The rearview mirror showed the empty street behind me. I didn't adjust it. I didn't look back. I just drove. We spend our lives building castles for our children, hoping they will inherit our strength, not just our stones. But I learned the hard way. You cannot build a legacy for someone who hasn't built their own character. Loyalty isn't in the DNA. It's in the daily choices we make. Sometimes, cutting the branch is the only way to save the tree. I didn't lose a son that day. I lost an illusion, and in return, I regained the most precious asset of all, my dignity. Protect your peace, even if it means waging war against those you love. If you enjoyed this story and believe that dignity is worth fighting for, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I have many more stories of justice and resilience to share with you. And tell me in the comments, do you think I should have told Jamal the truth about the DNA test, or was silence the better punishment? I read every single comment. See you in the next video.